will probably all notice that we are bigger tonight. We have our student trustees here for the first time, so welcome. It's great to see a full board up here again. In closed session, which started very early at 4 today, we unanimously approved the personnel summary, and there's a copy in the back for you to look at. Also, item 4C, the board voted to approve a confidential settlement agreement number 2017.05. This is a continuation of a previously approved settlement agreement in the amount of $3,000 per month through December 2020. And that is all I have to report from closed session. So now we're on item 8. We need a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. We have 2 public hearings tonight, so what I need to do is close this open session and open up our first public hearing on the CSEA initial proposal to TAM Union for the 17-18 school year.
Good evening, Ms. Anderson, Board, Superintendent Yoshihara. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce my colleague Tim Mullery, President of our local chapter of CSEA.
Welcome back. None of us left, huh? So CSEA has sunshined our articles with the district. So what we're going to be opening is Article 2, Working Conditions. We'd like to essentially come up with a better process of keeping track of comp time so that the district can get a true idea of how much comp time is actually out there. And also to help us actually, ironically, when state auditors come in, to have a true amount of spending for the district. So that's the thought behind that. Leaves and absences is Article 5. CSC is interested. There's no clarifying language about extended illness. That's mainly a language clarification thing we want to clear up. We want to move something from one part of the contract to another. We'll get into that. Article 10, salary and allowances. So we're looking for a fair and equitable salary increase, and we're also looking to adding an additional step on the salary schedule. And then there's an Appendix MM, which in 2010, when they laid off all the positions, there was an organizational job chart that was created to figure out how the work was going to be assessed. This was supposed to be renegotiated every year. It hasn't been negotiated since 2010. So we're looking to update that to get it up to today's standards. And then working with the district to update classified job descriptions to get them to what they currently are. A lot of them go back as far as 95. So that's what we're looking to do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mullery. So now is the time for public comment on this item. Is there any public comment on CSEA's initial proposal for sunshine items? Okay, seeing none, we will close this public hearing. And now, without further ado, we will open the second public hearing. And this is on sufficiency of instructional materials. Dr. Topier.
Hi, Ed Services would like to let the board know that we have no reports of insufficient materials, and we believe we have instructional materials for everyone.
Great, thank you. Is there any comment? I forgot to ask if anyone had any comments on this for Dr. Topier. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, this resolution for this item is on consent, so we will cover that when we approve the consent agenda momentarily. We are closed. Our public hearings are closed, and now we have reconvened into open session. Seems very silly, but I think that has to be done. All right, we are on item 11. and that is public comment on the consent agenda. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? I see none. So we are moving to number 12, which is approval of the consent agenda. So student trustees, what happens now is the consent agenda has a bunch of items. It's item 20 on tonight's agenda, items A through P. These are typically items that don't require much discussion. They're more standard logistical approvals. But sometimes we find things that we want to pull off the consent agenda and talk about in open session under trustee consideration. So now I'm asking if anyone wants to pull anything off of the consent agenda.
Item C.
Item C, which is the purchase orders.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Item D.
D,
D is a dog.
the warrants.
Yeah.
Okay.
warrants.
Barbara, I think you said you wanted to pull the minutes from
Yes, please.
August 8th.
Yes, please.
That's item A. Does anybody else have anything they want to pull off of the consent agenda? Okay, I will add those. All right, so now if someone could make a motion to approve the consent agenda with those two items, A and D, pulled for trustee consideration, I would appreciate it.
I move to approve the consent agenda with items A and D removed.
Is there a second?
I second it.
This is a roll call vote because we have resolutions.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Ms. Lundgren?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
And Ms. Anderson?
Aye. Okay, great. All right. Student trustee reports. I'm going to have Violet start since she's a seasoned veteran, but we will shake this up every time, and you'll never know who goes first.
All right, so our first day at Redwood, we did something different this year. We had everyone go to their advisory classes for 2 periods, and then we also had a guest speaker, an all-school lunch, and then we finished with a whole school rally, but we were broken up into our houses. So we have Bridge House, Lighthouse, Mountain House, and there's something, Lighthouse. Did I say that one? There's another house that I'm forgetting. Anyway, so so we were broken up into our houses for the rally instead of grades. And leadership has been organized. We organized a gift basket in order to support 2 students that got in a car crash on the way to school in Tiburon. In leadership, we're also collecting clothes for people in Houston who are suffering from the floods and hurricane. In our advisory, we just started this week collecting money for the storm as well in Texas, but we're donating it specifically to KIPP Houston High, which is another high school who got damaged by the flooding. We love our new portable classrooms and our new football field. Thank you. Our BTSD back-to-school dance went really well. We have our back-to-school night this Thursday, and we're still excited about the hopeful girls' restrooms being developed. Thank you.
Nina.
At the start of school at Tamalpais, we welcomed the CEC and Pathways programs to our campus. Tamalpais has been united onto one campus, and we're very excited about that. We held our annual all-school assembly surrounding community building, and that involved games, lunch, drawing, teacher introductions. We all got some Tamalpais swag, and we had our first advisory meeting, which is also a new program for Tamalpais this year. The team program is preparing for their annual Sierra trip later this month, and team has welcomed Diana Goldberg to their program instruction team. The Pathways program has their seniors all finalizing their internships for the rest of the year. And the CEC program has found a great home in their new classroom. And on Friday had a cultural diversity day, in which they brought food and pictures representative of their culture, and had a discussion about everything going on in the world. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And Maddie, would you like to go share a mic there?
So yeah, we had our first day of school. So we had a lot of alumni speakers, so they could talk about how Drake has helped them in their later varying careers. We also discussed our new theme. We're centering Drake around the theme of Take the Helm this year. So that means going out and being responsible for yourself and going and getting the things that you want. We also had a surprise for the students, which was a small speech by Congressman Jared Huffman, which was very impressive for all of the students. And then we ended with a rally for the whole school. Drake has a new schedule this year, so everyone's still getting used to it. A lot of the students are very impressed with the later start time. We moved the start time from 8 to 8:30. And students also like how school is condensed so that there's less long or sort of mid-sized breaks that don't really have enough time to get anything done. So students like how the school day is condensed. But there are some morning breaks the students wish were a little longer because students often get breakfast at those breaks. And then our tutorials were moved to one day at the end of the school day. And some students are they feel that day, having it at the end of the school day means that they're already super tired and have trouble getting some work done. But sports teams are able to schedule games that day so that the student doesn't have to miss class in order to go to the game, which is a lot of people who are playing sports are very excited about that. And then we have club day tomorrow, Wednesday.
Thank you. Jacob.
So Tam kicked off the first day of school with a unity rally that's going on to Tam High's theme, to elaborate on what Maddie said. As we really want to be a unified school and have everyone know each other and not just the people in their grades or the people from the middle school that they grew up with. At this rally, the acronym TAMHAWKS was shared with the students, which stands for togetherness, acceptance, mindset, honor, adaptability, work ethic, and kindness. These are the values that we want all TAM students to live by. Additionally, we had our first back-to-school dance similar to Redwood's, and we hope that it will be a new tradition. We want, in leadership this year, we're trying to get more student voice, as leadership is a tight-knit community, but it is not expanded beyond that, so we're trying to reach out. Another issue that TAM has is we have two very distinct groups at our school, as the board is probably aware of. There's the high-achieving students, which come from the more affluent backgrounds, and then there are the lower-achieving students that come from the low SES backgrounds. So we're trying to bridge that gap this year, as I believe it is the first year of our AVID program. Thank you.
So yeah, San Andreas started off their school year with a barbecue, and we had our campus supervisor on the grill, and we also had a bingo, which was very fun. We had prizes, such as gift cards and stuff like that. That was awesome. We're loving the new teachers. The ceramics class with Ben Rupers is doing great. He's awesome. Jade Solis, great teacher. We're also exploring opportunities for community service and opportunities to give back as a school, such as what Redwood is doing. And yeah, we had last year a bit of a problem with ditching after lunch or at lunch, and we had really bad attendance for sixth period because a lot of people also had free sixth periods and would go off with their friends because since they're leaving, they might also want to leave. So this year, we changed that, and now there is no free period or free sixth period, but we're having a lot better attendance, and we're having a lot more kids at lunch, and we're having a better sense of community at the school, and lunch is looking great. Great attendance for sixth period. Yeah.
That's
We're
great.
trucking.
Thank you. You all did a good job. It's nice and Short
Very
and
helpful.
succinct and a lot of information. Appreciate that. All right, now it's the adult trustee reports. Who wants to go first? Michael, he raised his hand. Didn't everyone see it?
Well, I had the opportunity to attend 2 back-to-school nights. The first one at TAM. Thank you to JC for providing the air conditioning, and which was an unbelievably warm night. But we got to learn about the acronym, Jacob, that you were talking about, and it was, I thought, an extremely well-attended evening. And the classrooms that I visited also expressed thanks to the foundation there for supplying equipment and other support, which was very good to see. And then I had the opportunity to go to Temescal, which was also a very interesting evening, very well attended by parents. They had some students who spoke as well, which was good. And I had an opportunity to visit and listen to the teachers in the CEC class, the special education class. And that was actually very exciting. In particular, there were some, there had already been some, I guess, poetry, I would say, that poetry assignment that the students had written and was posted on the board there. And it was very, I thought, very interesting, very heartfelt, very insightful in terms of sort of the mindsets of some of the students there. So I was just, it's good to see. We spent a lot of time talking about special education and ways that we could serve our students as well as save money. And here it is in action. After all, we spent a lot of time on this last year, and it was just great to see sort of the fruits of a lot of the work that we've been done. And of course, now the hard work is there. Teachers and students need to put in the hard work this year. But it was very impressive. So that's my report.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I've got 2 back-to-school nights, one at Drake, one at Temescal, a Drake 101 thing that I went to with Barbara, and a couple of day hikes with the team program. Someone's got to do that. One day. I'll start with the Drake 101. Because I thought that was really, for me, that was the highlight. That was a forum for new parents of new students at Drake. It was incredibly well handled by Liz, Chad, and Liz Chacon, the new assistant principal there. Liz was just like an old pro. Well, she is an old pro, of course she was.
She came in late.
But
for
it was,
something.
it was just experienced pro.
Yeah. Now she's
But it's the kind of thing that makes you proud to be part of this district. It was so well done. Then the Drake back to school night. Liz did not provide air conditioning. It was a warm night. I think it was 118 degrees in the weather station at Oak Manor that day. That's in the Drake attendance area. But it was very interesting going to the classes. Again, I was impressed. I should mention that one of the teachers bent my ear about how frustrating it is to be filling out forms for field trips, a frustration I shared for 21 years. We should be looking at that to somehow streamline the process. But all in all, that was a very good night. At Temescal, really well attended because now we've got the CEC, Counseling Enriched Classroom guys. The Counseling Enriched Classroom and Pathways program. So you had parents from Pathways, parents from Counseling Enriched Classroom, and the independent study students there. I spent almost all my time in the Counseling Enriched Classroom. So I can say there are 9 students enrolled. They've got a teacher, they've got 2 aides, and a part-time psychologist who's available. So it's really, really well staffed. And Sean McCormick, the new teacher, was very impressive. And that was well attended by parents. There were a lot, for 9 students, there were more than 9 parents in the room. So I'm very pleased with that. What else is there? Oh, the hikes. Well, I said it last year, the students just seem to be getting faster. They're harder to keep up with. Okay. Oh, JLAC is tomorrow. So I will express to Carol Mills while I'm there. Carol is, what's his name?
Mike McGuire.
Mike McGuire's legislative assistants. I will express our dismay that the state is mandating a 8:30 starting time for all schools in the state of California. Those should, oh, you guys, JLAC, that's the Joint Legislative Action Committee. So board members and superintendents from all the districts in Marin meet at the County Office of Education, which is up by Northgate Mall, once a month. We have a lobbyist in Sacramento. He calls in representatives from our congressman's office, our assemblyman's office, and our state senator's office are also at that meeting. So we talk about legislative matters, things that are before the legislature that are going to affect the schools. And, it starts with a conference call from our lobbyist who fills us in on all the stuff that's going on in Sacramento. An opportunity for you guys, though, is in January, and when we get the date firmed up, I'll get it to all of you. In January, we get in a bus and go up to Sacramento to the Capitol and then get briefed by all these different players up there. 2 years ago, the student trustees got an audience with the governor, Jerry Brown, who urged them to drop out of school and get a real education, among other things. So that's a good opportunity because you really get to see how the sausage is made. And believe me, it is a sausage. That's one of these processes that, you don't always want to know, how it came to pass. So that's my report. Barbara.
Good one. I too attended all the opening.
Barbara, the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I attended all the opening day activities, which were, again, let me echo it, it's worth repeating. All of you worked so hard, all the credential folks, the classified folks, to make every site a welcoming place. The message was so clear. I observed it firsthand with students coming up to me and other students saying, "May I help you? Are you lost?" Or, something of that. Just bringing us in together with a very clear message about we're all in this together. I could go on and on. I saw so many, I heard and saw so many good things happening everywhere. I did visit 2 AP language classes. They're dear to my heart. One was at the TAM Open House. I was happy to see that the canon that they're using also draws upon African American literature, both nonfiction and fiction, an important element to really giving you a base for succeeding not only in the AP exam, but obviously in the world in which we live right now. On the subject of AP also, I was at Redwood where I visited another AP language and comp class taught by one of our coaches. The material, because I taught that course, was so perfect and so sophisticated for students. They were already a step above, already ahead of the game by the material that they were given and they worked with. They were rubrics. And then when I walked into the Drake office, there were two books which I was gravitating towards that were being used for summer, required reading for the summer students for AP Language and Comp. One of them, Just Mercy, by Brian Stevenson. Very difficult read, not because it's difficult in terms of language, but it's difficult in terms of content. Poverty is, I can't even swallow to tell you how challenging and horrible some of those life stories are. But our students are being exposed to them, and anybody who walks into the Drake office can see what we're about. The message was, it didn't have to be on the, on the screen. It was right there. The Marin County School Boards Association also hosted a meeting out in Nicasio where Jared Huffman spoke so well and knows his audience. He knows us. It's very encouraging. The audience was asking a lot of good questions, particularly about DACA. He gets it, and that's very encouraging, and he's working hard on our behalf. Was it last week that we went? The county offered as a routine, actually a follow-up, I think, to information about the DACA, and what does that acronym stand for? The Dreamers?
Delayed.
Deferred action for childhood
Yeah.
arrivals.
Thank you.
Delayed action.
Deferred action.
Deferred action for childhood arrivals. The county, through Mary Jane Burke, our superintendent, has been hosting these meetings to inform all school districts, the personnel, to inform the children and the families that they're safe here. And I don't think that message can get out often enough. And that day, that morning, of course, all notions of safety were gone because of the president's decision. So that was the Canal Alliance, and I'm saying this particularly to students because the Canal Alliance is doing all kinds of things to support children and families. There will be volunteer opportunities for all kinds of folks to help them. And I hope you're nodding, meaning you've heard about Canal Alliance before. They can use our help. And they are very prepared. And we've got all kinds of possibilities, particularly with students who have any Spanish in their backgrounds. Get everything. Oh, one more thing. I saw cell phone caddies in rooms. And I have to tell you, does this teacher's heart good to see that. I was very, very impressed, but further impressed by the way the teachers were talking about how they use that system. So I couldn't be happier. I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. This has been the most impressive school opening I have ever attended, and I know you all worked hard to do it. Thank you.
So over the last 3 weeks, I too was fortunate to attend a couple of the schools on the opening day. Back to school night, I attended TAM's back to school night, and but probably the highlight of the last 3 weeks was an event that Board President Laura Anderson and I attended, and it was the Not in Our Town meeting that was at the community center. And the organization has been in existence for about 15 years. I just pulled up the website so I could say it accurately, but it's a movement to stop hate, address bullying, and build safe, inclusive communities for all. But I do want to say about this event was that it began with a documentary about a town in New York, and covered a hate crime and how the hate crime was handled, how it impacted the community, and it was the community members were interviewed, and then there were students there from Tam High that expressed who they related to in the film, and then community members spoke. And it was very interesting for me because I could relate a lot to what was shown in the documentary. There was a gentleman who had lived in the town for his whole life and spoke to the fact that he didn't ever believe anything like that could happen in his town, and that as times progressed and he met with, it was a crime against a Latino, and when he met with, his neighbors, he found that these were, these events have been going on all along, and he just didn't know it. And there was examples of students that were going to the library for some extra English classes, I believe it was, and they stopped going because they were harassed by other teenagers on their way to the library. And then as it came forward, it turned out it had been going on for a long time. And then there was the big issue that the community members that were being harassed did not call the police for multiple reasons. And so I was sitting there thinking, well, I thought Mill Valley, something like what happened last summer would never happen in Mill Valley. The same way I didn't think it would happen in Larkspur. And one thing that was coming forward was that denial is the first thing that we have to overcome in order to turn things around, or to at least address them. And then hearing students from Tam High describe events, I thought, whoa, it's exactly what I saw in the documentary. That person that was shocked in the documentary about things that happened that he didn't know was happening were happening. And so I left very perplexed. As a community member, a resident of Mill Valley and Marin, who had a certain perception of our town, as a parent, and then as a trustee. And then I thought, gee, as a trustee, what can I do? And I don't know. And I'm looking forward to the next year with all of you being more aware and looking to our student trustees to keep us aware, because I had no idea. And I need to have my ears open, and that's a start. But I look forward to working with all of you and administration to help me, and then help us collectively think about how we move forward. So, I thank everyone that was involved in putting that event on. I continue to reflect on it and have new, aha moments, or, epiphanies of what I saw. It was like having a big mirror watching, it was quite the evening. So thank you to everyone that put that event on.
Thank you. I just want to piggyback on that. That was one of the things that I wanted to report on too, and I know that Principal Farr is here, and that night at this event, I just want to give a shout out to JC. He was very brave and told more of a story, and I think that is leading by example. We have that going on in the district in a big way, so I appreciate that you did that, and that was a highlight of the last 3 weeks for me too. I did attend opening days at all sites except for Tam High, but I did go there the next night for back to school night, or I don't think it was the next night, it was the next week. I'm not going to talk any more about that. I think we've covered it, but I did the opening day activities, went to back to school night at Tam and Tamascal. I did look for air conditioning at Tam. I went to the new portable, one of the new portables, and was very happy that it was air conditioned, and was impressed with all the reading materials that I can't remember her name now. It was a sophomore core English teacher in the portable. Somebody help me out. I don't remember her name.
Abby? Okay.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
She was terrific, and went to the Not in Our Town event. Tamascal back to school night. I always like to go to Tamascal because they have a great spread of food, and I was very hungry that night, and was off to the Not in Our Town event after that, so I filled up. And then I went to the Rancho Nicasio event for Marin County School Boards Association, and that just feels good to be surrounded by other people that are doing our job, and we can use those acronyms and everyone knows what we're talking about for the most part. So that was great. Okay, I think that's it. Board President's report. I'm up next. You, Steely? You? Okay. All right. We have to share a mic, so we're squabbling here. Tonight, I just wanted to say something about our student trustees. We had, at 5 o'clock today, after closed session, we met at 5 with our 5 student trustees, 2 of whom are returning from last year. We're very lucky to have them sign up for another year, and then we have 3 new faces on the student trustee board, and we're so grateful that they have signed up to help us with our board business, and their perspective is so critical. So the student trustees were elected by their peers to represent their site's student voice, and we value that voice. Your perspective is so important. We talked about this during the orientation, but I want everybody out here and all those who are watching on video to know that you're here for a reason, and we really appreciate it. So this is our first meeting of this fiscal year, for your first meeting, not ours, but and we are going to be talking about the budget, which drives a lot of what we do. It's aligned with our goals. It's going to be a lot of detail, and your questions are always welcome, and all questions are good questions. So I talked in the orientation about preferential votes, and we'll just go through that slowly as they come. And if you have any procedural questions, just, make yourself known, and we will make sure that we're all on the same page before we move forward. So I hope you have an interesting year on the board, and we all look forward to working with you. So welcome aboard. That pun was intended. Okay, now you're up.
Thank you. I'm just going to highlight a couple things because we've heard a lot. Now that the school year has taken off, and we appreciate our board visiting our campuses and programs, and just a reminder to anybody in our community, but also to our board, when you do visit, please check in with our office to give the school and program a heads up prior to the visit. You'll find that our teachers and staff are very welcoming, but there are certain instances when it is helpful that they know who's on campus, not only for your safety, but for the safety of the school as well. So just a reminder for that. As you heard, on September 30th, the Marin County School Board hosted the annual Superintendent and Trustee Kickoff in Nicasio. I did want to give a shout out to Drake, Representative Maddie, who was there. And I think this is the first time that we've had student representatives there from a few of the schools, and Maddie represented our school, so it was good to see you there, Maddie. September 5th, you heard, was the Trustee Owens and myself, along with a large room of people, attended a legal session around the deferred action for childhood arrivals at the county office. There is a letter, I think it's on our website. If not, we can figure out about it. That's signed by a number of superintendents, led by Mary Jane, with regards to, not specifically around DACA, but certainly around not being on the sidelines, about taking a stance and being proactive with regards to some of the stuff we're seeing play out as it relates to not only immigration, but some of the national stuff. So there's a number of superintendents who have signed on to that, including myself. On September 7th, I'd have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Wasserman. He is a parent at TAM as well as a film producer. He produces films around equity. He had a strong interest in the equity and anti-racism work we're doing, so this provided a good conversation and what steps we can do in our community to continue this, support this work in the coming year. I do plan a follow-up meeting with him as well as the executive producer of a film called The Work that Ms. Colvin and I attended in the city about a few weeks ago. Last thing is, I do want to give a shout out to our trustees who've been able to visit our schools, and we have, as you've heard, so much great teaching and learning across our campuses. I appreciate our teachers, our counselors, and our classified staff for being so inviting to all of us in light of the increased enrollment. We do know that it adds pressure, and you'll hear about that pressure tonight as it relates to the budget, and that does not go unnoticed. Our next board meeting is in 2 weeks, I believe, on September 26th, so just mark that on your calendars. Thank you. Can I go on? All right. So on board communications, you have a memo from Lars Christensen, Assistant Superintendent of HR and Facilities, dated August 24th, regarding the Climate Tech Comprehensive Energy Savings Program proposal. Another memo from Lars Christensen, dated August 24th, regarding proposed additional fixed-date contract positions and CSEA layoff totals. Email from Mimi Willard, community member, dated August 22nd, regarding classroom space at Redwood High School. Email from Laura Effel, community member, dated August 22nd, regarding facilities master planning. Enrollment projections slide shared by Dr. Topier at the August 22nd board meeting. And then lastly, another email from Mimi Willard, community member, dated September 6th, regarding hiring a campaign consultant. That concludes the communications.
Does anyone have any questions on the board communications? Sometimes we have two memos here that we hadn't seen before. Does anybody have any questions on anything in those memos? Okay. Great. Now is the time of the evening for public comment for items not on the agenda. And I have one form filled out. I am going to read the language that I need to read before we have public comment, and then I'll call you up. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. And we have Mr. Christensen as our timekeeper up here to help you manage your time. Typically, we ask anyone who wishes to speak to the board during this time to fill out this little yellow card there in the back. This helps us record your name properly and helps me manage the public comment more efficiently. At this time, I only see one. And I believe is this for an item on the agenda or off the? No, as far as I understand, it's not on the agenda, but I'm sure you know better. Yes, yes. So this is the time for you to approach the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and it's nice to see the students engaged. I did want to check in with you. I received an email regarding my public records request about access to the Tam High pool. For those of you not familiar with the issue that I've been working on this summer, when I was at Tam High, there was open access to the Tam High pool during the summer, which meant that African American children from Marin City could swim at the pool for a very nominal rate. That has changed dramatically. This summer, classes were being offered for $295 a week for a 4-day summer swim camp, and I subsequently checked in with Soma Aquatics. Those are 4 half days. So good luck with that if you're a working parent. But this really is important. I was watching the coverage of the flooding in Houston. It was very, very upsetting, and especially if you know the CDC statistics, which I really hope this is something your generation will address, because we have failed. But depending on how you break down the CDC statistics, African American children are anywhere from 5 to 10 times as likely to drown as white children. And this is largely because they're not being provided access to pools. I have requested information from from the superintendent regarding when this stopped, because as far as I can tell from talking to neighbors in Mill Valley and in Marin City, this restricted/blocked access may have been going on for as many as 25 years. So I want to make sure that I'm being very careful in what I'm saying, which is why I've been requesting information since June from the district. I do want to say that on an equity basis, maybe access to a swimming pool seems a small matter, but it is indicative of the overall lack of opportunity, lack of access, and lack of fairness with which African American children are treated routinely in this county, in which their parents, in which their grandparents, in which their great-grandparents were treated after serving us so loyally during World War II in the shipyards of Marin. So I am looking for that material that you said I would have no later. If I'm understanding your email, Superintendent Yoshihara, I was to have that no later than September 11th. Perhaps I misread.
Yes, we have it.
Oh, how? It's, I'm sorry?
We have it. It's ready for your.
Okay. During office hours only? Okay. I'll ride my bike up and pick it up. But it is something I hope your generation does better with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is, that was Ava. Ava, how do you pronounce your last name? And the students didn't know your last name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have to go back up?
No, I can't remember. It's Crescent, is that right? Cressanti. Ava Cressanti. Okay. Is there any other public comment? All right. Then we are moving on to trustee considerations. Item A is Dr. Topier, who's going to report on our goals. Thank you, Mr. Christensen.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our student trustees. Tonight, I wanted to update the board on some ongoing equity work across the district. So across the district, there are initiatives being implemented to create inclusive cultures and positive school climate in order to address our opportunity and achievement gaps. As we have shared many times, our low socioeconomic students, our African American and Latino students have the lowest GPAs, the highest rates of absenteeism, the lowest rates of proficiency on the CASP for both ELA and math, highest dropout rates, are overrepresented in special ed, and underrepresented in all of our advanced classes. Those are our major goals for our school, is to narrow those gaps. These data have remained consistent for over 20 years, and by creating more inclusive environments, we believe students will have greater sense of belonging, which provides opportunity for greater levels of learning. So what's going on across the district? So at Drake High, as some of this stuff we've heard, so I just want to reiterate some of it. They continued their tradition of holding a day one experience to welcome new and returning students. Jared Huffman even addressed the student body. Additionally, this year at Drake, the staff will engage in learning about restorative practices as an alternative means to discipline. They'll be working with Circle Up, which is a restorative practices organization. The staff is focusing on the importance of relationships among the staff as well as with the students in establishing a positive school climate. Restorative practice aimed to create an inclusive culture in which all staff and students feel a sense of belonging and acceptance. Drake's in its second year of working with Circle Up. As you also heard, they have a theme this year, Take the Helm, which is an extension of their theme last year around agency. At TAM, the school has come together to collaborate on ways to establish a more unified school community, particularly in response to the hate graffiti incident that occurred this summer. The teacher leaders worked with the Associated Student Body and created the acronym TAM-HAWK, which we heard about earlier, which stands for Togetherness, Acceptance, Mindset, Honor, Authenticity, Work Ethic, and Grit, and Kindness. The school gathered at an assembly on the first day to directly address the hate-based graffiti and share the TAM-HAWK theme for the school year. Staff engaged students in mini lessons around each of the values in the acronym over the first 10 days of school. Additionally, as we heard, the TAM PTSA sponsored Not in Our Town, and we saw a brief video, a shortened version of Light in the Darkness, around the way a town responded to a racist incident and how they built unity around anti-racist activity. Redwood changed their first day of school this year to a day one experience to build a sense of community and belonging. There was a guest speaker who addressed the notion that differences make us stronger as a community and sent the message of acceptance. San Andreas is continuing to build their community after launching their new mascot, the Storm. I understand this year they'll be choosing a graphic to accompany the mascot. And Temescal continued opening school with a school-wide assembly to build community. Additionally, all of our schools are in their midterm WASC check-in, and each school has the goal to improve the learning of all students while narrowing our achievement and opportunity gaps. The sites either have or will be sharing recent student data to be used to monitor the site's progress towards that stated goal. The expanded leadership team will continue to engage in professional learning and building our capacity around equity-based leadership. And so when I look at all of this that's happening, I feel like there's a real sense of unity of vision and purpose across the district, and we're excited for the opportunity to continue to learn and grow as a system. The last thing I'd like to add is we as a community sent out Mary Jane Burke's DACA letter to our community today, so they would have the letter and also access to the resources that are on MCOE's website. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Topier? All right, thank you. Okay, item B is you again, Dr. Topier, approval of TAM LCAP amendment and letter. That was a quick break
Put my
for you.
glasses away. Okay. So what you have is the both the amended LCAP as well as the narrative. Thank goodness for the narrative, otherwise you'd never find the changes in the LCAP. So essentially, this is the process we go through with LCAP, although we're just finishing our third year, so we're still honing the process. This was also a new template. So a lot of what you see was moving things from one place in the template to another. Some of them are additions, others were just, I had put it in the wrong place and the state really wants to see it somewhere else. So this has I've already reviewed this with the county office, and we're good to go.
Okay. Are there any clarifying questions or comments from the adult trustees? I have a question that there were a couple typos identified. Were those corrected?
Yeah, those were corrected. You'll see the corrected version of the letter at the next board meeting.
Terrific. Thank you. Student trustees, do you have any questions, clarifying questions or comments for the presenter? No. Okay. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, this is a time for us to entertain a motion to approve these amendments to our LCAP. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move we approve the amendments to the LCAP.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, so this is the time for the students to demonstrate their preferential vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No abstentions? Very good, you did that well. Okay, adult trustees, our time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carried. Thank you. All right, item C, discuss the Board of Trustees advisor assignment for student trustees. My name is next to this. So last year, so typically in December when we elect new officers at the board level, we also take a look at the committee assignments for all of the trustees. And at that time, we assign someone to be our student trustee liaison. And Chuck, who's been doing this for the past 2 years, suggested that this year, starting this year, we assign an advisor when our student trustees first come on the board, so that you have the same person throughout your whole school year. So that is what that is why it's on the agenda tonight. And I guess I'll open this up to the board. Chuck, would you like to tell us about what you do as the student trustee advisor?
Well, first and foremost, I'm available to take questions, email, phone, though that's rare. But the idea behind it is that it's a completely new experience for the student trustees. This whole arcane system that they have to interface with, and they need someone to explain it. They need someone to explain the Brown Act. They need someone to explain, what the LCAP is, what role it plays. They need someone to explain how the budgeting process goes on. All this stuff. And they also need an ally, so that to encourage them and help them to bring up student concerns that the board would never even think about. That's the big picture. Last year, I started meeting with them infrequently, having dinners at, I think, 3 or 4 times at restaurants generally centrally located on Tuesday evenings when the board wasn't meeting. Not everybody could come. My God, young people are very busy. Their schedules are just insanely packed. But informally to talk about this stuff, to deal with questions. Jake and Violet can explain it a little, explain it from their perspective a little more. Maybe they were there for the food and nothing else. I don't know. But I think historically the student trustees have just been sort of dressing or paper wrapping or something that historically in my experience they really haven't been listened to, especially the year before I was on the board, my first year on the board, stuff would get brought up by students and it would just get completely blown away. One example is that one of the student trustees, and it has never been acted on, never been discussed, but brought up the idea of on minimum days having the staff have their staff meetings in the morning, the students coming to school in the afternoon, so that they wouldn't have to come in the morning, go home, and then come back for their athletic endeavors. And that made a whole lot of sense, and it just went away. So, my hope is whoever is the liaison for the student trustees can work to, allow a voice that gets heard. So that's kind of it.
Okay, so does anybody else have any questions about the role? Maybe Jacob and Violet, do you like having a liaison? You like the food?
I personally really enjoyed the dinners we had with Chairman Ford last year because it really gave us a chance to actually know what's going on. We would hear about the politics that were going on in Sacramento, which eventually filtered down into the policies that are going on at each meeting. So that sort of thing I found really useful.
Yeah. The same thing.
Did he make you call him Chairman Ford?
Is he telling everybody he's the chairman?
Chairman Mao, Chairman Ford.
I don't know. We're being filmed. I thought that it was important to be formal.
Yeah. I'll accept that.
So would anyone like to, Chuck, do you want to do it again? Do you want a break?
I would be absolutely delighted to do it again. It is of all the, I like doing JLAC, by the way, too, but I think of all these, board assignments we have, this is the plum. So, I'm willing to share the joy on one hand. On the other hand, I'd like to have it myself.
Chairman Ford.
Yeah, I want to share, but I don't want to share that much. I want to sort of throw out the illusion of being a generous person.
Would anyone else like to step into this role?
I'd like to be considered for next year. How's that? Can we do it that way?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I agree. It's quite an opportunity. I think I'll be ready, schedule-wise, by next year.
Okay.
So okay?
That's fine with me.
Have I heard all voices up here? I don't think so. Leslie, Michael?
I think Chuck's doing such a great job, or Chairman is doing such a great job that.
Chairman Ford, you're all going to be in olive green uniforms pretty soon with red stars on your coat. It'll be great.
You're good, Michael?
I never argue with the chairman.
Okay. I think if you're willing to continue doing it and then consider Barbara for next year, I think that sounds like a good fit. So we need to, is there action on this? No, it's discussion only. So, all right, you're it, Chairman Ford. Okay. On to item D, adopt resolution 17.3, approving the GAN limit. This is Mr. Menyon.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Menyon, and I'm the Senior Director, Fiscal Services. And I want to welcome the new students, the new board member. Welcome. And I just wanted to say something personal, and I'm going to get into the GAN limit, but this is really a great school to work at. I wish my kids were school-age kids. They're out of college. And recently, we found this book, some of the things that make me fall in love with this school. This is a car, a Ford Mustang that the kids at the,
Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't say kids, the student, the young student at this school, actually they rebuilt this car. And I'm really proud to be working for the district. Again, if my kids, here it is right here, if my kids were school-age kids, I would have brought them here to attend school. So, again, thank you. The GAN limit, basically, just to give, I think there was a question on this. What it is, to give you a big picture, it was introduced by a gentleman named Paul Gann. So they named it after him. That's why they call it GAN limit. And so in a nutshell, it was established to limit spending, government spending, because what happened in the 70s, the consumer price index was around about 8%, but government was spending increase was 14%. So this gentleman, Paul Gann, he passed this resolution to put a limit on what government would spend. So pretty much it's a formula that was benched back in 1978. They used it in 1978 as the benchmark, and every year they adjust it with the CPI and so forth. We don't get additional money for it. We don't do anything about it. It's part of the state software that we use, so it is self-extracting and self-calculating. But the law says every year we have to have a resolution that is board approved. So that's what this is. So that's why they call it a GAN limit. It's a limit on spending. You can't spend $10 if you're bringing in $7, pretty much. So I recommend that the board adopt a resolution to approve that 16, 17, and 17, 18 GAN limit.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this from the board? Questions or comments from Mr. Menyon? My questions were answered. Thank you, Mr. Mannion. Do we have any public comment on this item? Okay, so now we need is there any discussion? Nope. It's a pretty easy one. So now we need a motion to approve the resolution to approve the GAN limit for 16-17.
I move we pass resolution number 17.3, appropriations limit for fiscal years 2016-17 and 2017-18.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, preferential vote from the student trustees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That sounded like everyone. This is a roll call vote.
Yes, Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Ms. Lundgren?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
And Ms. Anderson?
Aye. Great, thank you. Now we have resolution number 17.4, education protection account. Mr. Mannion again.
Okay. This also was is another proposition that was passed back in 2012, and during that time, the state was struggling for money, and there were a lot of deferral going on. So they were withholding districts money, and they owe you $10, but they say we're going to pay you in 6 months, and so school district will have to go and borrow money just to run. So they passed this resolution that forced the state to say, you know what, we're gonna tax the voter, we're gonna pass a bond, and we're gonna take that money and put it in an account, and then we'll protect it so that school district can have that money available. Unfortunately for us, because we are basic aid school district, we don't get a lot of that money, but we still have to do the resolution. The money is strictly to be spent on teachers, like instructional certificate of staff. So that's what the money is spent on. So I recommend that the board adopt a resolution to accept the Prop 30. So we get about $800,000 a year in Prop 30. So.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mannion or comments on this, the EPA account? Nope. Public comment? Don't see public comment. So need a motion to approve this resolution.
I move we approve Resolution 17.4, the Education Protection Account.
Is there a second?
Second.
Preferential vote from the student trustees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Ms. Lundgren?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
And Ms. Anderson?
Aye. Great, thank you, Mr. Mannion. Item F is the unaudited actuals. 209 pages. We're not going to go through every page.
Once again, good evening. I noticed the agenda said from 7 o'clock to 10 p.m.
No,
I
typo.
don't know if I can
No.
last
No,
that
no,
long.
no.
I will try to be very
No,
brief.
please. Oh, God.
But again, I'm really honored and proud to be a part of this organization. This is my 6th month with the district. Again, I want to welcome the new trustee, student trustee. To give you a big picture, Tamalpais has roughly about, for the new people, roughly about 4,700 students. Our ADA is roughly 4,500 ADA. The difference between the enrollment and the ADA is what is the percentage or the percentage rate of attendance. So that's what we get funded on. We don't get funded on enrollment. We get funded on how often the students stay in the classroom. So based on our rate, between 95.5% of our students are in the classroom. So that's pretty good for high school. We have about 9 funds. I'm giving a big picture. The district operates 9 funds. Because we're a governmental agency, we utilize what they call fund accounting. We track our revenue and expenditures in different funds, and there's about 9 of them. And bulk of the money we track in the general fund. So I'm going to show later on how those funds are. We have roughly 500 employees that we pay, I think 3 or 4 different payroll per month. And we have about 5 sites. Excuse me? Oh, I'm just giving a big picture, and then we'll get into the slides. We're going to get into the slides. I just wanted to paint a big picture. And then, well, let me test this first. Okay, so I'm going to, just giving a big picture. This is not in the slides. I'm just giving a big picture for the new trustee. And so 5 school sites, 3 high school, and 2 alternative schools. And this is what the highlights is going to be. And if you have questions, just raise your hand, and I'm going to entertain your question during the presentation. Okay. Again, I hope I don't stay up here until 10 p.m. tonight. So, but if I have to, I will. I'm prepared. So the highlights, we'll talk about the closing process. And the second bullet there, we talked about it many, many times, the difference between the basic aid and the state-funded school, excuse me. And then we're going to talk about the funding factors, what goes into funding for school districts. And we spend a lot of time on the general fund because that's where most of our operations, expenditures, and revenues are tracked. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Prop 30, that's the EPA. And then I'm going to talk about the general fund, unrestricted. And then we'll talk about the component, and then there's some appendixes that we'll talk about. I do have a complete packet for the unaudited actuals. I have several copies, so if you need it. For the newcomers, we require that you read this page by page, and we'll test you later on. No, just kidding. So I have some copies here just in case. And so for the year-end closing process, we're required our fiscal year run from July 1 to June 30 of the following year. And we have to track all of our revenue and expenditures and report them to the state. But we send those to the county office no later than September 15. The county office review it, and then they submit that to the state. Then the state take those dollar amount and put it in their software, and the ending balance become the beginning balance for the subsequent year. They reported October 15. So we turned it to them September 15, and they reported to the state October 15. And so here's the difference. Here's the basic aid versus the state funded. Both of them they're comprised of property taxes, and but with the basic aid, if your property tax is a little bit higher, you get to keep that, and then the state subsidize you. So the good about the basic aid, you can project your revenue. It's easier to project it. The bad thing about basic aid is you don't get funding. You don't get extra money when you grow, and this is a struggle that Tamalpais has been having. We're growing by 200 people a year, and we have to come up with that money, and the general fund have to eat up that expenditure. So that's the negative side of being a basic aid. And here, for reporting purposes, we have to crunch the number. We have to use the formula for regular school and then for basic aid. And as you can see, because we are basic aid, our local revenue, the LCFA calculation is $56 million. That's additional. The difference has to do with the additional property tax that we collect. So if we were not a basic aid, we would get around about $40 million. Because we're basic aid, we get $16 million extra. So that's the plus side. And if you have questions, raise your hand, and then I can stop and respond to them. Okay. So here are the components that go into crunching the number for closing the book. Those are the ADA, and I'll talk about the basic aid briefly. We don't get additional money, but the Prop 30 portion, we get about $200 per ADA. And so here's what goes into the revenue, our revenue. The state aid is 700,000. Prop 30 is roughly about 900,000. We had a little bit of adjustment from prior year. The property tax is 56 million, and so that's about roughly 58. And then we transfer 357 of that money into our deferred maintenance account. And so here are more component factor. This is the lottery, and we get some one-time money. And then here's the revenue for the general fund. The unrestricted general fund and then the combined general fund, and we put it in a pie chart. And then here's the EP, and again, I broke it down. We had a beginning balance, and then this is the revenue we got for the year. And then the $900,000 were spent on teachers, certificate of staff. If I'm going too fast, slow me down, okay? And here's the expenditures. As you can see, roughly 78% of the district's unrestricted funds goes to salary and benefits.
Daniel, would you please explain the difference between restricted and unrestricted? I know we've heard it before, but
Yes.
I'm not sure the student trustees have heard it.
Thank you. The unrestricted general fund is, it is what it is. It's unrestricted. That fund can be used for any kind of operational purpose. The restricted fund is, those are called categorical dollars. There are restrictions on them. They can be used for specific purpose. For example, we have Title I. That's a federal dollar. There's specific restriction on that. There are local grants that we do get, but parents raise the money and they have specific use for those. Those are also considered restricted dollars. So restricted dollar is any money that the district has that has restriction on them, that there's specific purpose that they are to be used for. Title I, Title II, special ed, those are all restricted dollars.
Thank you.
Okay, any question? Okay. And then here is the component of the general fund. Basically, I summarized what I showed you earlier. And the item highlighted in black is a deficit that we encountered this year. And the reason, I'm gonna go into detail why the deficit is so high this year, okay? So the total revenue was 70 million, total expenditure 60, as you can see. If we didn't have any contribution to do, or I hate to use the word contribution, support, the right word is support. If we didn't have to support other programs in the district, the general fund would be doing pretty good. The surplus in the general fund is $10 million. That's excellent. But the reason we're operating in the deficit is because we have other support to other programs and to other funds that operate in the district. And this chart right here, we have several reporting periods. The first reporting period is we have to do a budget adoption. We adopt the budget early on in the year. And then we do a first interim report, which is like the quarterly report. Then we do a second interim report, which is a second quarterly report. Then we close the book. So what the chart does, it forces us to kind of monitor what we're projecting, what we're going to be. So at second interim, that's what we said we were going to close the book. That was a couple of months ago. And then then this is where we actually closed the book, and the difference is 800,000. The column, the last column, explain the variances. Okay, any question? Okay. Comment? Questions? And then this chart actually mapped out, this is like a historical trend, it's like a 10 years trend, because Superintendent and I were talking about this, and we were trying to figure what's been happening in the past 10 years. And this tells the history of the general fund, the unrestricted general fund. Again, what pops out this year, the reason we have this huge swing in the deficit is because we had a settlement this year that's 3% of every employee in the district. And Mr. Christie's not on me to put you on the spot. When was the last time the district settled with the staff?
The last time this was settled with our bargaining associations?
Mhm.
We settled with both associations last year.
Okay. With salary increases?
Correct.
Okay. You mean 16, 17? I mean, prior to that, I'm sorry, prior to 16, 17.
No, it's not in here.
About 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah,
The-
the year prior.
Okay, the year prior to that, okay. So the district settled for 3%, and then the district did some contribution because of the growth. As I mentioned earlier, we don't get additional funding when we grow, but we have to find, somebody mentioned the potable? Which one of you mentioned? Okay. The general fund pays for that. So because we don't get additional money from the state, we have to take unrestricted general money and transfer it to facility for growth and things like that. So that's what this, and they happen in 16, 17.
Daniel, that last slide is not in our packet, the one that came on the 10-year trend,
This one?
that one.
Oh, because okay, my apology, you downloaded it, the one that we loaded this yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah, so, and I can email it, and then it's in this packet. I have it in this packet.
okay, so will that be available to the public online?
It's online already.
It
We
is.
uploaded, yes.
I just got online.
Do you see it?
Okay, so we'll upload it. We will upload it tomorrow.
I
It's-
like the information on this slide, so it would be good to have it.
Okay. Okay. So maybe we'll help. We'll help. So so these are the contributing factor for the deficit, and since others don't have it, do you have questions? Maybe we can discuss it some more. Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
With respect to the next to last bullet point, right, on the bottom. So these are areas in which unrestricted general funds are being used to support other programs.
Yes. And other funds.
Yeah, so I thought from prior discussions, and maybe, David, you recall this, I thought that the adult and community education program was in fact, did not encroach on our general fund dollars, and this indicates, and there's some other materials in here that indicate that it does. So why am I not remembering correctly?
Yeah, so if you're referring to specifically the adult and community ed, and Daniel can chime in, adult and community ed, I believe, are listed as a single fund. Within that are these two particular programs. Adult ed is, I think, it's fair to say that they live within their means in terms of where they're funded. Community ed,
Wait a minute, but the question is, does it encroach on are we using general fund dollars to support that program or not?
not for the adult ed component of it. For the community ed, we do.
Right.
But they both sit within the same fund. So whatever number that is, the title of that fund says adult and community ed, but they're not bifurcated within that fund. So the contribution that is made is the contribution specific to community ed. We cannot use adult ed funds to augment community ed, but they reside under the same number. So that's my understanding is therefore that's the contribution.
And what's the amount of the encroachment for community ed?
I'm gonna get to it, but I can get into the detail because we segregate them by resource number, and for presentation purpose, I didn't get into that detail, but I can get the detail.
Before you go to the next slide, do you have a follow-on? Are you done?
Yes, I think.
Okay, so when I look at this slide and we look at contributing factors for the deficit, I mean, it can be every year when we hit this slide or this time, we can look back and sharpen our pencils or pat ourselves on the back for being pretty darn close, and it helps with planning moving forward. Typically, I think when we all look at a slide like this, we look at the contributing factors and want to avoid that. And my concern is even though I understand why you put the 3% settlements down, we will have that every time we have a settlement. And I'm just a little concerned the way that's presented. There might be, and you may, maybe after the meeting, you
Sure.
could work with the superintendent, but I don't want it to appear that whenever we reach a settlement with
Okay.
our unions that, oh, shoot, that's one of the contributing factors. So it's just something I think maybe we can think
Sure.
about moving forward.
Yes. And the reason I have this here, because that was not in the budget.
Right, and maybe
so-
that's something we can think about because,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. It was a very helpful slide.
Okay. And then another thing that I will do is I'm going to put this on the trend also, because these are the annual contribution. This is what is causing the deficit. So we can put this on a trend and start looking at it year by year.
Oh,
That
that'd
will
be
help.
great.
Yes.
Yeah, looking at a trend.
Yes. And so here's what happened. This right here, the 2.2 million that was authorized, that's what's caused most of the deficit. And that's one time. So if we didn't have that transfer, the deficit would not be 3.2. Okay, and we did it for growth, to buy those new potables and so forth. Okay. Any questions on this?
Can I, does that third line answer Trustee Futterman's question with regards to the contribution to
Yes.
community ed?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly correct. Fund 11.
Yeah, so it's hard to understand, for me, it's hard to understand the significance of that number or some of these unless we can see it as, compared to budget, and unless we can see, a trend over the last X number of years.
Okay.
Right, so I don't know if we're making progress on community. I don't know whether we budgeted for that, We'll just take this one as an example. Like, we can take any of these as an example. We've obviously spent time on special education, which is an $8.7 million number, right? But I don't know. I don't know how that 270 compares to, like I said, we budgeted how it compares to 3 years ago or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And then, of course, probably the fundamental question is, what can we do about it going forward? I mean, that's just one example, right? So.
At first interim, the next reporting period is first interim. I'm gonna do a trend on this. And I don't, how many, maybe go by 5 years?
Well, I know, you and
Okay.
the superintendent should discuss it.
So if I can we go back to slide 13? Or maybe 12, 13, yes. So here, Michael, is if we focus on the variance in regards to what we've budgeted for, so it's second interim, those amounts show what we budgeted. And so it shows, contributions going out. Second interim ended December 31st. So, that's 9 months ago. So 9 months ago, we had predicted those numbers in the second interim column. So what happens between then and what you're seeing here tonight is really the variance. And so I guess if we were to take a macro view and say, well, what did we not budget from the last major reporting period, you could look at where there are large variances. And perhaps one of the areas, and I get Leslie's point, but let's ignore the percentage, but any increase that goes any given year will have an effect on the budget after, if you don't settle by second interim. So in that case, it shows up here. But other areas, right? So we, in terms of our transfers out, there was another $228,000 that was not budgeted from second interim. So all of these pieces add up all the way down to produce that 822 you see from second interim. So when you ask what's not budgeted, that's the delta that was not seen over and above where we were in December. And that could have swung the other way, this way. It swung more to the red, if you will, by 822,000.
Right. On the revenue side, we came ahead like a little over $500,000 more than we anticipated. But I think to further comment on what you mentioned, the question then becomes, what can we do to reduce the contribution to the other program? Am I correct? how do we reduce these number overall every year? Is that correct?
That is one of the questions. I think what Michael was alluding to also is just to see a trend.
Right. A
how-
downward trend, yeah.
Well, and like even 5 years ago, what was the contribution to Fund 11, for example? And what did we budget for Fund 11 versus how we ended?
I can do that. I can put a trend in.
And is it, I have a follow-up question, the Fund 11, community ed and adult ed are combined in Fund 11. Have we ever thought about splitting it out? So we have one for each?
Well, we do, yes, I can split it up and say that this is adult ed and this is community ed. I can do that on here. Because we track it by a resource, and I just did the presentation at the fund level, but I can drill down further. So yes, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the big picture here, I mean, I appreciate you guys answering the questions, and I thank you for clarifying the fact that adult and community is together. I may have known that at one point and forgotten it. But I mean, but the big picture here is, you know, and we're going to talk about it. We talked about it at the last board meeting. We're going to talk about it again now. We talk about the revenue side, right? But if we have big picture budget issues, we talk revenue, we talk expense, right? So this is what highlights this portion of the presentation, and is really what highlights expense.
Right.
And so we have targeted certain areas and achieved some savings in certain areas, right? For, you know, for example, the print shop was an area that we were able to, you know, with a lot of work, you know, a lot of cooperation, a lot of discussions with our unions, a lot of good work by Lars, you know, we were able to focus on that. You know, we spent a lot of time on special ed. You know, we started the CC program, which contributes to the reduction of that, you know, that expense. So one of the things we're looking for is sort of other ideas, other suggestions, if you will. Where can we, if we're going to be prudent stewards of the taxpayers' money, where can we identify areas in here where we're able to, you know, reduce some of our, you know, some of effectively what we're paying for these, you know, we're using our general funds to pay for effectively our unfunded mandates a lot of the time. And so we're looking for ideas there. Where can we make a difference on both sides of the ledger? Now we're talking about the expense side of the ledger. So that's kind of for me anyway, that's sort of the motivation as part of this discussion. That's the context.
Got it.
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
Do
sorry.
you have any great answers to come up with $14 million? I mean, it's clear that that's what, it's the supports, the
Right.
contributions. You highlighted that earlier, but it's clear on this slide that we have some areas where we are not able to fund appropriately.
Right. And like this right here, there's nothing we can do about it, because this is mandated, the routine restricted maintenance account. We have to contribute that roughly about 3% of the general fund. This one, we have very little control over. That's the special ed people's transportation cost, as is this one. If there's any wiggle room, it will be, we have to revisit this. This is the contribution, or I should say support to the child nutritional program. And then, what's the other one? This one, hopefully this will go away with the contribution up here. We can utilize this money to cover some of the deficit that went to this fund. The purpose for this was we had charged expenditures in here, but we didn't collect enough developer fee for the fiscal year, so we have to subsidize this fund. So hopefully 17, 18, we're going to be collecting a lot more developer's fee, and this will go away next year. I know for sure this will go away next year. So here, there's some area here to work, and here, and I believe here. So those are areas that the district can focus on and do something about.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, Michael, whether your question was rhetorical or not per se. It poses a bigger question with regards to that. don't think the answers are simple. We are starting a fiscal/LCAP group, of which we've invited broad stakeholders, including students. And I think we can get more granular within that conversation. I think part of the dilemma here is the context of which some of this exists resides around potentially collectively bargained issues when you get into personnel matters. Because as you see up there, you know, we're going to rely on the expertise of our education folks as it dictates special education costs, and to some extent, those are harder to control. And you can see where the big dollar amounts lie. You know, if you just take out the top three, right? It's 12 out of the $14 million. So you can tinker with everything else, but 12 of the 14 million sit in the top three. So there's limitations to where we can sort of pick away without causing sort of intense pain, if you will, with regards to that. Child nutrition, you know, for example, is one that we certainly can look into more. The idea behind that is in high socioeconomic districts, the programs generally are contribution programs. And I've spent some time looking at this with other basic aid high school districts. A number of those around us, and without exception, they're all contribution programs, because the real meal reimbursement under National School Lunch Program, both state and federal, do not offset the operating costs for us. So if you take it from a macro, let's assume we're 5% free and reduced. If you were to take every kid and you assume they were paying for their meals, that would not offset the cost for our students. And the meals generated by paying students, you could not raise high enough to offset that cost. So there's sort of this dilemma like, well, you can just raise the price of meals. Well, you can to an extent until people start lining up and say, well, why does our food cost $15 when I can walk across the street and whatever? So there's these challenges for the cost of some of these programs and how much we can move the needle. The second one is an interesting one because that directly relates to growth, and that's these costs related to interim housing. There are costs related to change orders. There are costs related to anything that we have that is associated with growth, and that's a challenging one because it's. I think, as some of our trustees know, when you get into construction costs, they can fluctuate quite a bit based upon what we discover through the process. So that's largely where number 2 comes from. So I think this group would allow us to get into more granular on some of those ideas, but when 12 of the 14 resides in the top 3, we know where, if you're going to pick away at it, you got to pick away at it. I don't know if that helps or not. I mean, they're not easy.
Yeah.
In the words of Willie Sutton, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
It is where
we
the
can't.
cost.
Yeah, we can't turn away special ed student. That's against the law. So so here's the component of the general fund. We were able to meet our 3% reserve, the state required reserve, and then the 14% reserve from the board. So that's pretty good. And then I put this chart here, a little. Excuse me. You had a
Sorry.
question?
On the last slide.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 3% reserve, is that the EPA thing that we only get $800,000 from? Like earlier you talked about how there was a different state reserve that like everyone has to pay into and we get $800,000 out of. Am I going insane?
No. Good question. That's a very good question. For the Education Protection Act, that's at the state level. So the state of California, they have several sources that they collect money. There's income tax, they put levies and fees, the driver license and things like that. And then they have corporate tax. So they collect all of this source and they put it in a big pot. Then there's a law that said that money you have to give X amount to school, you have to give X amount to the court system, to police, the fire department, and so forth. So the portion that they gave to school district, they were telling school district, yeah, we owe you $10, but we're gonna pay you over 18 months period. Instead of paying you within 12 months, they'll pay you over 18 months period. So what happened is school district, we had to run payroll on a regular monthly. And so the school district had to go out to banks and borrow money just to pay their staff with the mindset that they're gonna get this money that the state owed them, right? So Prop 30 says, we're gonna go and pass a bond to make sure we have some money set aside so we can give Tamalpais or whatever school district, we can give them the $10 we owe them. That's what that is. Okay. It's not additional funding, it's like a, how do I put it? It's a guarantee that we're gonna get what they owe us, sort of. So for basic aid district, that really doesn't have that much impact. So the 3% reserve is two different things.
Oh, okay.
This one, the state says for every school district in the state of California, 3% of your expenditures you have to maintain that for urgency, for like economic uncertainty. So that's like a reserve. You have to keep that money in the general fund.
Oh wait, so that money stays like in the district, it doesn't go to the state?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a reserve for us. It's the state telling you, you gotta leave $10 in your checking account, just in case if your mom don't have money to give you so you can ride a bus. So you gotta leave $10 in your account, and that money is your money.
Thank you.
Okay. Then the district, the governing board said, you know what, we want more. So we would like to have the 3% reserve, but we want to keep additional 14% reserve because we are a basic aid district and we don't get additional money for growth. So we'd like to keep 14% additional money in our reserve. And that's what that is. So total is 17%. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's our money.
Thank you.
Good question. And then this one, I put this slide just to let the public know that the $3 million that went into Fund 40, we had about 5.4 million sitting in there. We spent 1.5. So what's sitting in Fund 40 right now to fund these growths is roughly about $4 million, 3.9 million.
Among other,
So
other things. I mean, growth is
among other things. I'm sorry, among other
one
things.
component.
Right. Sorry.
Our fields and stuff, those turf fields, come out of there.
They came out of here. Okay. So again, from my perspective, and I here to give my opinion, the district is doing far better, would have been far better off if we didn't have this issue with the growth that we're funding out of our general fund. If we didn't have that, we would have been doing pretty good. And so these are the appendixes, and I try to, in the package, I had a narrative in there. I don't know if anybody had a chance to read it, because one of the things that I do is that education is very dear to my heart. I take my approach with budgeting. I don't sit in the office and just do debits and credit. When I develop the budget, I try to put a face so teachers and the classrooms and students and things like that. That's how I think when I develop the budget. So I try to kind of give a highlights of operation. So if you have the chance to look at the narrative, you read, you can do further reading. And if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
You had a chart. Can I ask a question? So
Yes.
just in terms of presentation, so you had a chart earlier that compared second interim with the unaudited actuals with the variance and then with an explanation.
Yes.
Right. So it would be, I think it would be useful for the board if we had, I think this is a little bit misleading because this isn't really against budget. Right?
Okay.
And what I'd like to see is because we've got budget, first interim, second
Yes.
interim. I think we need a chart that includes all that information
Okay.
so that we can see, so that, because it really gives an idea. I think it gives a much more accurate picture in terms of how the year has evolved,
Okay.
where we were when we were going into it, when we adopted the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because this already reflects the changes, that were incorporated, between,
Right,
June
June
and
and
December.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Anyway, that's just my point. I think in the future, when you put up a chart like this, if you could include original, first interim, second interim, and really, then we can really see the evolution of both how accurate is our budgeting, as well as, sort of the development of revenue and expenses during the year.
Yeah, point well taken. Yeah. So I had one that I shared with the superintendent where we had a adopted budget, first interim, second interim, estimated actual, and then the closing of the book. Yes. So I already have something like that, but for presentation.
Don't just share it with David.
But the reason, the rationale behind this was the second interim was the last official budget. That was the report that the board approved. So that was the rationale behind this. And any further questions?
Does anyone up here have any clarifying questions for Daniel? I had some comments. I liked your highlights section. I wrote it down here. I wanted to commend you for that. I like seeing all the things that don't show up in numbers columns that we are doing in the district. So I appreciate that you have had that in there.
Thank you.
Prop 30 is set to expire December of 2018.
I got to get the detail on that.
Well, that's what I read, and I'm just wondering if we know if that's going to be on a ballot. That's $900,000 currently.
I'm going to follow up with that.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, so now it's time for public comment on the unaudited actuals. Does anyone have any questions out in the audience? Seeing none, it's discussion time on this. This is an action item. We need to approve the unaudited actuals, so it's time for us to talk about it. People are looking a little glazed over up here. I mean, we're going the wrong direction, but we knew that. We've talked about this. We had a whole workshop last time we met on the need to balance our budget, or try to. So we're all painfully aware of our financial situation, I think. Okay. Does anybody want to talk about this anymore?
Just that in comparison to years past, it seems like we hit a lot closer to what we anticipated, at least between the last interim and this one. And I want to echo what Michael Futterman was saying. It'd be nice, and it may not be appropriate, and that's up to you and the superintendent, because I know some of this is standard state format that you have to abide by. And it would be helpful to hear from you and the superintendent, your analysis when you look at these numbers. Like you said, you put a face to it, and I appreciate that. That's what we want to do. But that's the only way to help prioritize as we move forward. So I liked all your ideas with the trend and comparison, and Michael Futterman talking about having the original budget, and maybe that deserves a separate agenda item. I don't know. That's up to you. But it is definitely what we need to keep looking at. But thank you very much. It was a very helpful presentation, and appreciate all the backup material.
Thank you. My again, on a personal note, my uncle is an educator, so I come from a educated family. So my budget, I try not to make my budget too dry. I try to tell people what the operational
you keep
results.
working at that. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have a question. Supports versus contributions. I noticed that you changed that, and I'm wondering what your feeling is about using that word versus contribution.
I don't like the word contribution and encroachment because it's like, contribution is like, you see a homeless person and you say, here you go, I'm going to contribute, and now go with your problem. Support is, this is part of us. The special ed program is part of the district. Food services is part of the district. Adult ed is part of the district, so we're supporting them rather than they're encroaching, because encroach is like, they're not part of it, they're just bugging us. So that's why I use the word support, because they're part of the whole.
It's more
I don't know if that makes
inclusive.
sense.
I like it. It's more inclusive and
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Supportive.
I do have a question or a
Yep.
comment. How do we, given that compensation for staff, we know it's about, 85% of the budget, but we do know that the issue of compensation is one that is ongoing that we consider, and yet we look at this and it's like there's still a figure out there, or there's still some, I don't even know how to put it. Is it an assumption? Is that the right word when we're talking about budgets? I mean, I don't even know how to put words to it. It just seems like there's something that's always out there that's not included in the numbers. And it's hard to.
Well, there are a couple of things, if I can help, if I think I understand. There are some variables that we use when we're developing the budget, because we don't have all of the facts.
Right.
So there's some assumption that goes into developing the budget. We project enrollment, and we develop the budget. And at year end, we have what they call the P2 ADA. That's when we do the actual reporting. Then we have the annual ADA. So those are things that some of those we don't have control over then, but the projections are fairly accurate. For a basic ed school district, we don't get additional money. So it is what it is, unless there are new increase in property taxes and things of that nature. But the unaudited actual is what it is. That's actual result. And what's going to happen is in a couple of months from now, the auditors are going to come here and they're going to comb, they're going to look at everything. They're going to look at our projection. They're going to look at where we close the book, and they're going to verify that whatever I've done or whatever we reported fairly represent what we said it is. So we have the unaudited actuals, then we're going to have the audited financial report. And 9 times out of 10 is always, it is what it is. There might be some, what you call it, a procedural that we didn't follow, or how to call it, what's the word I'm trying to, findings, some audit finding, internal control where you deposited a check but you didn't sign the back of the check, those sort of things. But 9 times out of 10, the numbers, usually it is what it is. And I don't know if that helped to clarify. I don't think there's anything else out there from my perspective.
Yeah.
Because if there's anything out there, the auditor, the independent auditor will look at it. The state of California will look at it. And then the county office of ed will look at it. So we have the county office of ed, this whole package is going to the county office of ed tomorrow. And they're going to comb through it. And then they're going to send it to the state. And then the auditor's going to come and look at it. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
Okay.
I don't think I posed my remarks in any cogent fashion. I think that was the problem. And when I do, I'll bring it up again if I can figure it out.
Can I try to take a stab, Barbara, to help
Go ahead.
as well? So in the budget, we make certain assumptions based upon the current state of affairs. So we budget increases to salary based upon things like step and column.
Right.
Again, that's jargon, but again, the movement of of staff, we do base increases on things like healthcare cost, energy costs. And this is things I've heard. So we don't budget for the public and student. We don't budget an increase in salary. And it's an interesting philosophical discussion. The dilemma is, let's hypothetically say we do. Let's say we're going to build in there, because on the assumptions you can build whatever you want. We're going to say we're going to assume an X% salary increase. One could argue that, hey, you just negotiated something for us and we didn't agree with that. But there's nothing that says you can't assume that. What we usually share with the board is we share with you what we think a 1% costs, because that you can calculate that. You can run that numerically through the system. You could say, what does 1% cost for all units? And that's going to be some number. And I'll share publicly now, it's roughly 500,000. And people can do the math on that and multiply that. That's fairly common across districts. There is nothing negotiating that because that's a factual amount. We don't build that into the assumptions because then people may say, well, why did you do that? Why did you assume some amount of increase in salaries when we haven't even talked about what we think should be? What we show is how much is left at the end of the day for reserves, and people will look at that and make their own decisions. But we do calculate things that we can, again, step and column healthcare and those things, but we don't budget increases, not to my experience. And again, not that you can't, but it raises all kinds of questions when you do. But certainly we share what 1% is, and that's just an easy number to sort of work with in your head as you broadly try to figure out, well, what does this cost? I know that helps, but those are things we've asked in the past. Don't you just build in some increase? No, we don't build in any increase. There's nothing built into there aside from fixed costs that we know.
Okay.
Corey's got a quizzical look, but I'm happy to.
I'm sorry I missed the question and answer periods. Because I was trying to help. I have about 18 questions now around that statement.
Yeah. Go, you ready? Yeah, you have questions?
I don't know if I'm allowed to do that.
Oh, okay.
Public comment has passed. You have questions?
We're happy to talk with Corey.
We work directly with the superintendent on your
That's
question.
fine. My concern is that this is on as a decision. You're making a decision on this tonight, whether to approve it or not. So any questions will not be considered in that approval or not.
You were not here during public comment?
I was. I just made
Something
comments.
came up.
On your discussion, I now have several questions. That's all I'm saying. I understand the rules.
You know, I would like to hear what your questions are, if the board is okay with that.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, if you could ask, yeah.
Thank you. Most of these are around the assumptions that you're talking about. And so I'm going to start with what you just said, that if you assume a certain percentage of increase, then you hear that, hey, that wasn't negotiated, why are you doing that? But I would ask then, if you assume no percent increase, how could that be seen as any more palatable than putting in a number, assuming that that's what the increase would be? I'm not quite sure. You started your conversation by saying this is a philosophical question, and I agree with you. So I'm wondering if it could not be considered to start to build a budget with a range in mind, a percentage range as an increase in compensation for all of the units, as you put it, or finish the year out in negotiations with the final step being negotiated a range for compensation increase for the following school year. Therefore, it's no longer an assumption, it's been done at the table. And so you avoid the risk of somebody claiming, hey, we never negotiated that, when we indeed did. So it's a change in sort of the paradigm. It's a change in how you approach your budget. But I would argue that to assume no percentage increase has a very terrible message. And the message seems to be that here's what's left. And I'm not sure that reflects, I hope that doesn't reflect the value I hope you're placing on your teaching staff and your classifieds. So that's just one comment around that. Does it have to be approached the way it's been approached for all these years? Okay, so question. You mentioned also the healthcare. My understanding of the healthcare based on my reading of this budget is that and our conversations earlier is that healthcare tends to go up about 2.5% to 3.5% each year. That's been the trend for about 10 years or so. You budget at 5%, even though that's happened a couple times over that 10-year period, that for sure, and in fact, it exceeded it one time. But if I'm understanding this correctly now, you're budgeting at a 10.8% increase. And I'm not sure what that's based on. What assumption is that based on? Is that information you've received from our healthcare providers that they are indeed going to increase by that amount? Just a question I have around that. The contribution to adult ed / community ed doubled in this next year's budget. And I understand the distinction between those two programs. And one we don't contribute to, comes out of state funding, but one we do. So my question is, did we really double our funding for community ed from last year till now? Another question, property tax. You estimate that to come in at 4.8% for next year. And I'm curious what the percentage was of the property tax increase this year compared to last year, or 2016-17 compared to 2015-16. What was that percentage? And just trying to figure out how do you arrive at a 4.8% projected increase for the coming school year. There's a number of other questions that I have around what are some things, like, for example, what is other employee benefits? Budgeted at 21.9%. I don't know what those are. That's not clear in the budget what those are. I don't know what OPEB is at a plus 105%. And again, I'll go back to the health and wellness issue around a 10.9% increase when it's been 2.5% to 3.5% for many years. And then STRS, you've actually got it budgeted as going down in the 17-18 budget by 2.3%. And I'm just wondering if that's truly a change in STRS, because if it is, that's exactly the opposite of what we've been hearing. Or is it that you're calculating that in a different way? So those are my questions. Thank you for considering my questions.
Let me just start. So for clarity for the board tonight, a lot of the questions I think that were posed by Corey, thank you, Corey, relate, as you say, to the budget. Tonight's request is approval of the unaudited actual. So these are items that were closing the books on the prior fiscal year. So I think it is important that there's clarity and understanding of why there's some questions around those numbers. And hopefully we can work with you in seeking those. But unless I'm not mistaken, most of what you had were questions around why are these figures seem to be different than the budget, and they very well could be. I know some of them are, like STRS, for example. I know the reason behind that. But those are different from the approval of the unaudited actuals. Has nothing to do with the budget. Those are, changes that certainly would be reflected by first interim when we do the next major reporting period at the end of October. So we don't spend too much time on that, but we make sure we answer those, and there's clarity on those, certainly as we move forward this coming year.
May I comment on that? Would you be kind enough to email those to me? And as the superintendent said, when I do the first interim report, then we can respond to all of those. I would like to. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I've got a question for Daniel. On page 3, this one here where you had the 2016-17 general fund expenditures.
This one?
No. Yeah, that works.
Sure.
You've got, the jump in certificated salaries and classified salaries is $5.8 million. The jump in benefits is, a little over $5 million. Why did the benefits go up? Why are the benefits almost 100%?
Where is it, John?
Okay, line 3, benefits going from unrestricted to combined.
Oh, you know what? I apologize. I think I'm going to revise this chart next time. This chart is just looking at unrestricted general fund. So I should have had the restricted, unrestricted, and the combined. So it's not. It's not a jump. It's just. There should be three columns. The general fund has two. There's restricted general fund and unrestricted general fund, and then you have the combined general fund.
Yeah.
So usually for reporting purposes.
No, but what I'm saying is that, if you had the restricted general fund, your combined certificated classified salaries would be 5.8 million, and then the benefits would be 5 million.
Right.
So why are the benefits so high relative to the salaries?
I'm going to take a stab at it, and
Yeah.
Daniel will verify. This is just from too many years of doing this. My gut is that for the restricted dollars, particularly when we're dealing with classified staff, and they can usually attest to this, the cost on the benefit side is nearly equal, if not exceeding, what the salary can be when you add all the statutory costs. Again, you don't just think health. You got to think PERS. You got to think employee contribution, state contribution. You got to think SUI. You got to think unemployment. All of those statutory costs that show up under benefits for a classified employee can sometimes equal, if not exceed, what the actual salary is. And so when you bring that in, and you bring in a little bit for the certificated, you can hit the 5 million for benefits when you take the two. Because if you take the salary between the restricted and add those up, right? 2.5 and whatever that is, 3. That's 5 million in salary increase.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a far stretch to say that's a 5 million in benefits as well. They almost equal when you look at certificate. And you have to see that breakdown on an individual basis.
Why is that? Why are they so high for those particular employees?
Well,
Are they
healthcare alone is $15,500 per employee.
Yeah.
I think last year. That's just healthcare. So you add on top of that all.
Okay, so if they're lower on the pay scale, then
Yes.
it's going to be.
It represents a larger percentage, right? And then now you add, again, 18% STIRS, 5%, all of those statutory costs. It's surprising until you actually see it. It's like the hidden side of the cost brings that up.
Okay, and then we may be dealing with employees who are close to 0.6 FTEs.
Yes.
And then they get the full.
If they do get full,
they get
that's,
the
yes.
full benefits, okay.
That's correct. And I apologize for not understanding your question correctly. Thank you, Dr. Wai.
I just wanted you to know, I scrolled down to page 210 and 211. The appendices have the 10-year trend. It's in there, so we all have it. That one slide that I said had so much information, you did give that to us. I thought it looked familiar, but it's at the very end.
Okay.
And the appendix right before that, I also really like that. I'm trying to give you accolades for
Thank
the
you.
things that are new with this unaudited actual. You
Can-
listed all of the things that happened over the summer related to facilities at each site.
Okay.
And
Trying to put picture to what's going on.
yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
Mary, could you pull up the report, the packet, so the public can see what we're talking about? Yes. Oh. Well.
It's back there. So you don't need to send us anything.
Okay.
We've got it.
Okay.
Okay, so we've had, is there any more discussion on this? Okay, so this is an action item. We need a motion to approve the 2016-17 unaudited actuals financial report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Preferential vote from the student trustees. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was everyone. And adult trustees. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. That's a lot of work. And we have work to do in this department, and we know it. Okay, item G, approval of capital campaign strategist contract.
Thank you, members of the board, student trustees. Before you tonight, we have the consideration of the capital campaign strategist contract, Whitehurst Mosher. This was originally brought to the board back on July 18th. I won't go into all the details of that again, but I will highlight some of the pieces. Back on July 18th, at that time in the consideration of a bond and/or parcel tax, there were quotes solicited from 3 firms, one of which was Whitehurst Mosher, and I used a series of criteria in determining which firm to recommend. That included price, references, size of firm, and measures that they worked on, as well as client familiarity. And I had checked references on all those. I got quotes on all those, and looked at the scope of the measures of which they had worked with, and then called a number of the clients for feedback and ranked them, and had recommended at that time on July for Whitehurst Mosher. Since then, I have also checked with my colleagues in Marin County with regards to how they have brought forward their consultant/strategist to the board. And the great majority were brought forth by superintendent recommendation. I basically asked the question, I think one of my trustees was interested, is, does the board sort of make the choice, or do they based upon the superintendent recommendation? So that's sort of what I asked them. I mean, that was what I asked them. And, it's no secret. The only ones that were different was Shoreline. Superintendent there said he recommends 2 or 3 and the board picks. And then Kentfield uses a subcommittee. The subcommittee has a board member on that committee, and the subcommittee makes the recommendation to the board. Other than that, Nevada or Ross Valley, Reed, Sausalito, Marin City, Lagunitas, Mill Valley School District, and Larkspur, Corte Madera School District all replied back of the ones who responded to me that the superintendent makes the recommendation. So that's just the information I have about how this process plays out. I continue in that time since July 18th to work with the firm on the questions that have arisen since that time, both from the public as well as our trustees, and a negotiation of the contract, of which you will see tonight. I feel that they've been nothing but responsive and accommodating through this process. I've also taken the time to watch the video of this meeting. As you know, these are recorded from July 18th, when we did spend over an hour on this particular topic. I would ask, and I hope that the board can check your assumptions as you consider Whitehurst Mosher. While I know that you and others may not agree around the particular choice of words in their initial presentation that evening, I do believe their explanation when Jill in that evening came up with regards to how the firm plans to work with differing viewpoints. What I recall in checking with my team, they had shared that they wanted to bring those stakeholders who had differing viewpoints in, and to listen for understanding, and they want to incorporate those viewpoints into strategies for the district. And so I felt that that was a solid reasoning, and what we would expect with any firm that we work with. If there are differing viewpoints, we want to bring those viewpoints in, and we want to consider and listen and how we're going to incorporate that in our strategies. So that was shared that evening. Again, I went back to the video and looked at that. I do want to highlight a few of the changes. I do apologize, I didn't include a red line, but I will my best try to highlight the changes. There aren't a ton of changes, but there are a few that I think are important. Certainly the start date is not a prior date, but the date of tonight, should the board take action on this, as when they would begin work. They added John Whitehurst to the list of who would work with Jill as the principal, but also John. The strategy or the rationale behind this is they wanted to show, because I said, why did you add John? And they said that we want to show the district that we are willing to put our top folks to work with you. We're not going to relegate this to sort of our secondary line. So John is the owner, and Jill is a principal in there. So that was the spirit behind that, and nothing more into that. So assuming positive intent, I have to take that at face value. The section 2 with regards to scope of work, they changed one section around the second bullet around conducting electoral research. Electoral was added, and analyzing practical applications for revenue. There was a lot of talk at the workshop. I shared with Jill the workshop video and encouraged her to watch it. She did say she would. But she knew there was a lot of conversation around addressing the structural deficit, that was a priority, and why a lot of conversation was around the conversation of a parcel tax. So the wording was changed to analyzing practical applications for revenue. In 2.2, this section around the $30,000 payment for 6 months, that's still in there, but a large part of it was stricken with regards to some of the commitments for the district. They say that the fees are due, and they go into sort of, that hasn't changed a whole lot with regards to that. The dates are just moved forward from September to March. That's the 6 months for that. 2.2 had a section with regards to expenses related to mileage and parking. That has been stricken. There will be no claims with regards to that. The amount is the same. They will say that they will be billed at cost without markup. And so whatever cost they incur, generally these are typically lodging costs or reproduction costs that would be needed, would be billed at cost. Section 3 has to do with essentially separation agreements. What happens if the board decides to take a different direction? And so this language has been changed quite a bit. What it basically states now is that should after 30 days the client, meaning the district, chooses to abandon the objective and sort of move in a different direction, the Whitehurst Mosher would still provide us services that are relevant to our needs for a period of 60 days. So it's not that we're just going to release them and pay them for no services rendered. They will provide services, and it states here, address the district's current financial challenges, because those will not go away. You just saw that tonight, as outlined in the scope of work, and to provide public information and community outreach for at least that 60-day period. The services will be developed to facilitate community engagement with respect to current, this is all new stuff, that's why I'm reading it, to current district goals, including but not limited to the LCAP, enrollment growth, structural deficit, and although not specific to any capital campaign, again, because the district has made a different choice in direction at that point. There was a section in which there was assessment of essentially a late fee, I would call it, a 1.5% late fee. That has all been stricken. There is no late fee. There is a 30-day period of receipt of invoice. I did actually check back in July with fiscal services. That is not a problem for them to pay a 30-day time frame. That's actually a time frame with most credit cards that we have. I should also add that even if that is not met, there is no penalty. So again, if you don't pay it, there is no penalty. That's all stricken. So that was clarified with the firm. So again, there isn't a problem for fiscal to meet that challenge. We do meet that anyway now with credit cards that are not very forgiving for invoices due. Section 4 is largely unchanged. There's a few short wordage added that doesn't change the meaning. Section 5.1, in terms of either party will terminate, has been stricken because of the termination clause now that resides in 3.1. So those termination clauses would have been superseded by the 60-day amount. So that's now, it's a moot point, so those have been stricken. 5.2 adds indemnification for both parties. These are generally reciprocal, and says that they would indemnify us and we would indemnify them. Insurance language was added as it relates to anything that relates to auto driving. If should anything happen, that we're not liable for those costs, and those minimum requirements meet with our JPA guidelines. Those have all been vetted, and then showing proof. The last part, what used to be 5.2 to 5.7, have been renumbered to 5.4 to 5.9 and remain the same. And I have worked with our attorney extensively during the period from July 21st till now, and with Atkinson Andelson, and worked with him back and forth, and he has suggested some pieces, including the liability pieces, to add in there, and a few small pieces, but otherwise he says that the scope of work, the other agreements all meet within the acceptable guidelines of what the service they're going to provide. So that's what you see here tonight with them, Whitehurst Mosher. Again, I have continued to work with Joe and make the recommendation based upon what I share with you, and you have the amended contract before you here tonight for consideration.
Thank you for that background. Appreciate that. Are there any clarifying questions or comments for Dr. Yoshihara from the board?
Dr. Yoshihara, I just want to make note and thank you. I know you've clearly, from reviewing the contract, you've done a great deal of work, and I really appreciate it. And thank you also for the recap. I do recall in July that we approved the process that you took in terms of evaluating the firms and your recommendations. So that's helpful too. But I understand tonight we're just approving the contract. So thank you.
Correct. Yes.
Any other comments or questions?
So I would just say, there's one, that's 5.2 with respect to indemnification. It's actually a one-way, the way I read it.
I knew Michael would look at that. Okay, so.
It's not mutual, it's one way.
To our benefit, right?
It's to the benefit of the district, right?
Okay.
We have no obligation to indemnify them. So
I'm okay with it being to our benefit, but thank you. One way to the district.
to our favor. Right.
I just want to comment that I'm glad that we paused on this a little bit and had the workshop in between, because I think it did inform the scope of work better in this contract, and it better reflects what we're looking for in a campaign consultant. So I think it was good that we pressed the pause button.
I have a clarifying question still regarding who the client is. There's a reference further down. I mean, at the top, it's got your name, but there's a reference further down as the district.
1.2, yeah.
So who is the client?
The
We have
client-
to sign off on everything, so I don't understand why we, as a board, are not considered the client.
Because typically the superintendent signs off on contracts, I would guess. Again, this is, the attorney looked at this. I mean, I'm happy to bring that up with him, but typically the superintendent signs off on the contract. And so I represent on behalf of the board, the school district.
Barbara, the way I read it,
Yes, please.
it's the district that's the contract. It's not the superintendent. It's the district who's the client. So if you look at the first paragraph where it says who the agreement is between, it indicates it's between Whitehurst Mosher and the Tamalpais Union High School District.
Right.
And then it defines who, and then it gives further information about those entities. It identifies the two principals, Jill Golub and John Whitehurst, who are representing for purposes of this agreement and effectively have the authority, as we'll see later, to bind Whitehurst Mosher. And that David, as a superintendent, ultimately has the authority to bind the district in terms of entering into this contract on behalf of the district.
Okay.
And that's consistent. If you go all the way down to the bottom in the signature lines, you'll see that the two parties are the two entities, Whitehurst Mosher on the one hand, the district on the other hand. But somebody needs to sign on behalf of each entity with the authority to do so, and that's the way it's articulated. So I don't think it's ambiguous.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board on this contract? Students have any questions? Okay, so now it's time for a public comment. I have 2 public comment cards, and if there's anybody else that wants to comment, we have Mr. Christensen helping to manage the time. Looks like Laura Effel is up first.
Thank you. You already know my name is Laura Effel, and I live in Larkspur. Over the weekend, I sent you, all the board members, some comments.
Laura, could you lower the mic a little bit? Thanks.
Okay. I sent some comments over the weekend, and Dr. Yoshihara has answered some of my questions, including he gave a staff report that we'd never seen in writing, but he gave it today. I do disagree with Mr. Futterman about whether this is clear who the client is. I think a simple rewrite of that paragraph would clear it up. The district is the client, and the fact that the superintendent signs on its behalf is certainly appropriate, but the district is the client, not Dr. Yoshihara. I'd like to emphasize one of my comments, which I actually got kind of wrong. Item 5.7, I said it states that the district had the contract reviewed by its counsel. That's not what it says. It says each had the opportunity to receive the advice of independent legal counsel. And we've just heard Dr. Yoshihara talk about the advice he received from counsel. But the significance of this paragraph may not be obvious. This affects contract interpretation. The rest of the sentence in the proposed contract says, the parties shall agree that there shall be no presumption against the drafter of this agreement. Well, the drafter of this agreement is Whitehurst Mosher. And this relates to other people's comments about this. For example, Trustee Lundgren criticized the description of what this contractor was going to do for the district. And in the event of a controversy over what the contractor is supposed to do, this gives them an advantage in contract interpretation. And so I would suggest that this should be stricken. I consider it problematic. And it could affect other things as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to find the relevant section here. Okay. I'm Mimi Willard from Kentfield, and I want to reiterate my kudos for the excellent workshop and what you accomplished in the extra month as far as focusing what it is that you want to achieve by hiring a campaign consultant. So we started with, though, what I thought was a badly flawed process on the July 18th meeting, where I was critical of the fact that there wasn't a written staff report. And I think that that is an abdication of your responsibility as board members. It's one thing to take advice from your superintendent and to respect that advice, and it's another thing to actually have the data and the information in front of you to review. Then we had this neutralize opposition thing that happened on July 18th. That is a major PR hole that can't be papered over. And in addition to that, you're now proposing to hire a firm with only 3 consultants, one of whom, I don't know which one, Dr. Futterman said on July 18th he knows and was involved in some things together in the past. And I haven't heard any public discussion of what that is. It is appropriate to have the attorney on your board as a point person on a draft contract, but I don't know what's the nature of that relationship. And that was your point person. And meanwhile, you have Whitehurst Mosher, which was let go by the Kentfield School District, which amongst other things cited some performance issues. I don't know what those were. So this was tabled, postponed, that's good.
now here we are again. I think this is a chance for a do-over, a clean slate. Why would you go with Whitehurst Mosier? Is this your only best choice? Where's the staff report? And I think that you still got the issue here that you're going to be fighting all the way upstream about neutralizing opposition as you go forward to try to do some kind of parcel tax. And then finally, I would say Director Lundgren at that meeting expressed a strong objection to the early termination clause and payment that goes with that, and it's been replaced with lipstick on a pig, which is a clause that now says when you want to terminate, you get to keep them for 60 days to do your community outreach. And obviously, if you got to that situation, this is a consultant with whom you don't have a good trust relationship. And finally, I'd point out that you're still being kind of asked to pre-approve an unfinished contract in that in paragraph 2.2, it's still unclear when the contract starts and whether you pay retroactively to September 1. So I think that you should look carefully at that language before you approve the contract. Thank you.
Okay, discussion up here now. I don't see any other public comment. Thank you.
I want to clarify something with you, Dr. Yoshihara. My memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that I don't remember if it was the July 18th. I think it was before July 18th because you hadn't provided a recommendation yet, but you did talk about the process, and we, as a board, said we didn't want to be a member on your selection committee at that time, and that was openly discussed. Someone else, and so we wanted you just to go do your selection process, and then you did come back with the process you were taking. And my recollection is that we approved the criteria.
Yeah, I don't know if they're technically approved, but certainly
But yeah,
discussed.
so I just want to make a comment to that. I have seen cases where, yes, there's a staff report, but sometimes there's not. We just know that you followed, you're letting us know you followed the objective process and you give us the recommendation. Is that what you found when you talked to other school districts as well?
Correct, and similar to, as you've now seen a number of times with, construction-related sort of processes, when we're going out to hire for a architect, for example, the staff, in this case, Lars, would go out and work on, soliciting bids and putting out an RFP if necessary, and there's a process by which a firm would be selected, and that then comes to the board for recommendation, but there isn't a report that, goes behind that, typically, and that's more common with regards to, the selection or recommendation of a, vendor's not the right word, but firm to the board. You see that with Ed Services when they are bringing forward oftentimes different organizations to work around wellness issues, and by which they ask the board to approve a contract, and you see that in the evening for the first time. There's not a report of the process by which they did that, but there's the assumption that they follow the process. On occasion, and I've been a part of and talked to other boards, specifically San Rafael and Mill Valley, where the board members may ask something like, did you follow the process? Yes. Did you select? Are you recommending the top firm or agency in that process? Yes. And again, the idea behind that is, did the district follow a process? Because yes, at the end of the day, if we're to be challenged on this, we have the documentation that we're able to go back and confirm the people we spoke with, and those methodologies behind that. I have all that information, but those are not usually publicly shared for obvious reasons, or maybe not so obvious reasons.
And one of the attorneys that works for the district reviewed this contract, and
in
like
full,
you said. Okay.
In full, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need an exact date on item 2.2? September?
What do I have now? 2.2.
Ms. Willard just
I see
brought it
what you're
up,
saying.
and I didn't.
Today's date then?
Well, the very beginning has a date, right?
It has an effective date at the very beginning.
Oh, September 12th.
Yes. It says at the top paragraph,
Yeah.
first paragraph, September 12th.
But it says you pay from September 1.
This has been reviewed by our
Yeah.
attorney.
I'm just reading. It says this, all fees are due and payable the first day of each month.
September 1, right?
I don't know if that
It says
means,
September 2017, it doesn't say September 1.
it says all fees are due and payable the first day of each month. I think
It just
that's,
says that's when you pay it, but here it just says this is the.
yeah. So September 12th, I think, is the effective date.
Yeah.
Any other discussion up here? Yes?
Yeah, let me just say, first of all, I want to thank Ms. Willard for referring to me as Dr. Futterman. My parents will be so pleased that they finally have a child.
You can join Chairman Ford.
Finally have a doctor, that was so kind of you. So I guess one thing that I would say is I'm not the point person on this. I haven't reviewed this. We have independent counsel. Just to clarify, in case anybody thinks there's any kind of conflict of interest, is that one of the principals of this organization, Mark Mosher, was involved with a group of people, and I was one of the people involved back in the late 1980s, and we formed a Democratic Club in the city and county of San Francisco, and that was the extent of my involvement with Mark back then. And there's somebody else who's a principal of the organization, Sam Lauder, and I'm friends with his family, and we were involved in some other sort of community stuff related to Jewish community stuff in the Bay Area. But I don't have any financial interest. I have no familial interest or anything of that sort. If anything, I was just trying to disclose that I had some familiarity with some of these people. With regard to section, Ms. Ethel addressed section 5.7, which is the contract interpretation clause. This is a very standard clause in contracts. And really, the reason that parties put this in a clause like this, what it says, there's a general rule of contract law. Let me say it this way. Some contracts are considered to be contracts of adhesion. That's a sort of a technical term. So when a party signs up for a credit card, you don't negotiate the terms of the credit card agreement. And effectively, you either agree to it or you don't get the credit card. That's called contract of adhesion. And if there's ever a question about whether there's some kind of an ambiguity in the contract, if there was some kind of a dispute, there's a general rule of contract interpretation that the contract would be, to the extent there's an ambiguity, the contract would be construed against the drafter of the contract because there really wasn't a negotiated agreement. This is not a contract of adhesion. This is a negotiated agreement as to which both sides had attorneys. In fact, it's been changed based upon the discussions of the parties. So this kind of paragraph would be something, if I had been the lawyer involved in this and negotiating, I would have agreed to put this in here as well, because it's very representative of the nature of this kind of agreement. So just wanted to clarify that.
And I'd like to say something about the lipstick on the pig, because I want to comment on that, because because I can see how that might have. I looked at it as very differently, that you're recommending this firm. It's been very clear that we have a lot of community interest in everything we do, and if in a month we decide we don't want to go out for a parcel tax in a year, we still have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to lose any ground of working with the community. Even when it comes to things in the past, there's still some confusion about what the facilities master plan. So I was looking at it in terms of not losing ground, that great, we can work with them, and if we change our mind on the timing, we can just keep on going and get some work done the next 2 months. So I just wanted to clarify that I looked at that clause slightly differently. And just maybe, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
And also, in all fairness with the dates, there's no intent, and I'm sure in working with them, we're not going to be paying for work prior to board approval. And 6 months, in my mind, is 6 calendar days from when they start.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we would have good legitimate ground to press for that.
Lars, you're still here. You're welcome to stay. Any other discussion?
I have a comment. I still can't get past, although I appreciate the way you have addressed the issues that we did bring up. I still am stuck with the way they use language. I've lost confidence in these people, irrespective of the way this contract has been recrafted. I can't seem to be persuaded. The contract may be fine, but I can't be persuaded about them as a company. I'm still not persuaded. So I'm just saying that. Irrespective of this contract and the way it's put together, I don't have confidence in the company itself at this point, still. I haven't been persuaded. Sorry.
Okay. Well, given that, it's always best to have a unanimous vote.
I have one process. I think the night, was it July 18th that term was used? And wasn't that, I think that was the same night that we voted that we would award that contract.
That's what my record shows.
And it was that I thought we did, but it's been since then that, as you've thought more about it, because that's what I was looking at, we still approved the contract. So Barbara's changed her mind. I respect that. I just wanted to so I suppose the onus is on the district to manage and work closely with the contractor.
It is, and
Yeah.
and Barbara, yes, the board has to make a vote on this. I assume positive intent, and I place myself. There are times when I, make mistakes, and if we view it as that, we're in a district on, circle up. This is about how we learn from those, and But that's a decision as a trustee you have to make. I know in our students, when I teach my daughter every night that if you make a mistake, you be better for it and you be stronger for it.
That may be true. But just under the circumstances, it's a critical representation to me about an insensitivity to language, which is all about, this is what we're doing. Any kind of survey is a response to language. And the way you create that question or the way you solicit a response, the language is critical. And it's at that part of it that I'm just not convinced. I think it's a serious reflection. To me, it's a serious reflection. And I don't know that I can vote no. I don't think the work necessarily requires my agreement with them. I think we have to do this work. There's no question. We've got to proceed. So I don't want to impede our process, but at the same time, I feel okay about my vote.
So that was a fatal flaw, in other words, for you?
For me, it was.
Okay.
Okay, but you would support the majority vote of the board?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's,
Okay. Any more discussion on this item? All right, so at this point, we need a motion to approve this contract.
Okay. I move we approve the agreement for research strategy and communications consulting with Whitehurst Mosier campaign strategy and media.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? This was a big one.
Preferential vote.
And now we have a preferential vote for the 3 remaining student trustees. All those in favor of this contract, the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. If you want to abstain.
Yeah, I feel that this is a divisive issue, and I do not have nearly enough information about it to cast a vote either way, so I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, you got that?
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the self-evaluation. Okay.
My laptops do stop.
So this is the first time that I'm aware that this board has conducted a formal board self-evaluation, which is something that is in our governance handbook and is recommended by the California School Board Association that every school board in the state conduct. It is a way for us to demonstrate our accountability to the community and a willingness to strengthen and improve our governance practices. The board supports continuous improvement throughout the district, and this is our attempt to walk our talk and see how we might be able to improve the way we proceed. So we opted as a board to pay $200 to the California School Boards Association, and they in turn sent us a survey with about 57 questions or something like that, covering 11 different categories, and we had 2 weeks to respond, and we had a 100% participation, I'm happy to report. And then we're supposed to use these results to fortify our governance agreements, which are spelled out in our governance handbook. We will take a look at that governance handbook again in December or January. We do that annually and edit it as needed based partially on the results of this board self-evaluation. So I read through, since we've never done this, and I'm sort of the facilitator but also a participant, just wanted to remind everyone that when we each took the survey, it was one point in time based on our perceptions at that time. This is not factually based. It's just perceptive. It's like most surveys, that's how it happens. The purpose of the board self-evaluation is to be a starting point for an effective discussion about our governance work. And it is supposed to be constructive, and we should be using this feedback to improve our performance. So if everyone can pull it up on their screen, if you have that capability, that would be, we can all be looking at the same thing. We do have a board bylaw 9400 that talks about the board self-evaluation, and so we are compliant with our board bylaw. That we can pat ourselves on the back for that.
So you guys can't see this? Right?
Can you? So while we're working on our technical issues, basically there were 11 different areas: board unity, roles and responsibilities, board culture, board operations, board meetings, board development, setting direction, structure, support, accountability, and community leadership. And there were like 5 or 6 questions for each category. And we were all supposed to answer each question on a scale of almost always, often, less often, rarely, or not sure. So 5 different possible answers for each question. And then the answers were tabulated, and we were given a score, basically. And so we had lots of areas where most of us said that we almost always or often felt that the statement was correct. And we had very few where most of us, a majority, felt that we rarely or less often agreed with the statement presented. So I think I highlighted the areas that we felt were areas of strength, items where all 5 of us said that we felt strongly that we agreed with that statement. I'm not going to read through all of them because it's almost 9 and there are 58 questions. Is that the magic number? Okay, I'm just going to keep talking then. So what we're supposed to do is talk about, so this is very high level, and the goal tonight is to focus on 3 to 5 areas, the most important areas for improving board performance, which will be most beneficial to the board and the district. And then set goals for each area. We could do that through the governance handbook in December, January, and possibly dedicate some time for a board development workshop, which could be in conjunction with the governance handbook. Okay, so I'm going to keep going since we don't have it up here. I pulled out 5 items that seem to be an area. I decided we don't need to go over all the areas where we think we're doing a decent job, but the areas that where we could use improvement are the roles and responsibilities of the board and superintendent, the collective bargaining process, the board self-evaluation, community leadership, specifically our outreach and messaging, and I wrote down sending agenda item questions in advance. So does anybody else have anything that jumped out at them, something that we need to work on?
I don't see anything. I think it's very helpful. That it was $200 very well spent from my point of view. It just seems very clear to me that item number 54 and 58 is something we've been talking about, and certainly as we go into the community and get their feedback about the kinds of issues we're facing, I think we can accomplish, we can improve these areas in 54 and 58 just by virtue of the process that we're engaged in right now. And I think we've all talked about that. So I think it's our next step that will go along with everything we've been talking about doing anyway. But I do want to just comment about how good it feels from my perspective that I have experienced, even though this last vote may not have indicated that, but I really do experience a cohesion and a common purpose and a common sense that we're working together in the right direction. And to see this broken down this way, I find it's very encouraging and it's very helpful.
Good. So those 2 items you think we don't need to set goals because we're...
Oh, I think we could set goals. I think we could set goals, but I do see them as surfacing at the right time. I think we're going to do it.
I asked everyone to bring in their governance handbooks because we're not going to get this all done tonight, but if you want to scribble some notes down related to what's already written in our governance handbook, ways for us to use what we've learned from this board self-evaluation to do our jobs better. Outreach, messaging, that's in here somewhere. We can work on it between now and December. There's a red one. If you scroll, I'm going up now to number 7. Mary, can you go to number 7? Board members agree on the role and responsibilities of the board and the superintendent. That is an area of growth for most members. So it might be worth it for us, you know, I mean, anytime we see something like that, look back in the governance handbook and reread what we're supposed to be doing versus the superintendent and admin. And then, I'm doing all the talking here. This is not supposed to be all me.
Great, though.
So,
Yeah, you're doing great.
I was just trying to carry it when we didn't have it up there, but now, no excuses. Pipe up. You're all laughing at me now. People are getting slap happy. Lots of blues and greens. I think that's a good sign. I think it would have been really disconcerting to see, you know, reds everywhere.
One comment I have is that I'm wondering if some of the areas that we can see that we are areas of growth is that we look at resources at CSBA, because I've found that they have a lot more particulars than our governance handbook. I think that would be worth seeking out. When I've gone to their courses, for instance, they
Yeah.
put a lot of really good clarity on things, rather than just go to with our government's handbook.
So we could address that when we're looking at when we have our board governance workshop.
There we go.
We can utilize other resources.
Sorry, you can go first.
No, go for it.
Okay, I have a quick question. Will the political advisor, in addition to taking polls about the parcel tax, will they also be able to like inform people of what's going on, like on the board? Like if that's something that they could do, because I noticed that like a bunch of the red things were like communication with the community members.
That is my understanding, Jacob, that they are going to help us with our outreach as part of this campaign, explain what we're about and why we need more money and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Michael, or Chuck, one of you two is going to say.
Jacob's comment was right in line with where I was going to go with this. Thank you. I mean,
So that's why I disagree with the peg and lipstick thing. We need to do this, you know, so that's what they'll be able to help us regardless of what we decide in a month.
Right. I mean, and frankly, we probably have I think that this section 54 through 58, community leadership, probably reflects a broader need. You know, it's broader than just the parcel tax and
Right,
issues
I agree.
underlining the need for the parcel tax. It's this sort of communications piece and outreach and that kind of thing. So, you know, so I think that maybe the question is, what do? We know that this is an area where we have room for growth.
Yeah.
So how do we come up with a plan, you know, to address this issue? So I think one component, I think, is going to be, as you astutely observe, you know, is going to come, ideally will flow from the attention of these political consultants. But I think the question is, well, maybe we should come up with, you know, how do we come up with a broader plan if that's just one component? And then, you know, is that something that should we ask the superintendent to come up with an idea? Should we do some kind of a subcommittee? Should we, you know, there was also some you know, I mean, how do we address it, you know, based on this, you know, based on these results of this section of the poll?
Do you have any suggestions, Superintendent? You're part of our governance team. Dr. Yoshihara was not allowed to participate in this this exercise, which I thought was odd because he is part of our governance team, but I don't think any of this is a surprise to you.
I think tying in with what was shared before, there is a need at some level for, you know, this what I call public information of how we share with our different stakeholders. And I see that as a need for our district. And how we go about that, certainly there may be differing opinions, but I think the need is there. My hope and intent is to bring more information to the board in consideration of this need as as I think the board has some background with regards to some kind of support to provide that. Our colleagues in my other districts have this resource to assist staff in informing the public, informing our stakeholders, parents, community, staff, to help be proactive in some of the areas where I think we could be more proactive. This, shows it, but I think it's more than just the board. It's staff. It's how we work with our stakeholders. And somebody who is versed in that would be an asset for us. So that's, I think based on this, that could be a higher priority now, and there may be a connection and a timeliness to bringing that forward for discussion with the board.
Are you suggesting an employee?
That is a solution. It could be someone on a consultant or a contract, or it could be an employee. I've been working hard to see if we can do that within the realms of a classified position. I think our classified folks, and there are some who are incredibly capable of doing this. I think we need to work with, if possible, with Csea and whether a position like that could work. I have some possible leads with some municipalities who have done this within the classified realm. So I need to adapt that to our district, work with Lars and Csea to see if we can bring that forward. So that's one idea, and then certainly the other one is some kind of contract consultant position with perhaps, a certificated retired position or something like that. But regardless, some kind of public information position.
It also, Cindy McCauley and Michael Futterman, the two board presidents before myself, sent out quarterly or so letters to the community, which they did in their role while we were in a transition mode. And I'm wondering, I haven't done that because we now have a superintendent who has 2 years on the board, and I'm wondering if one thing we could consider as a board is asking our superintendent to send out more regular missives to the community at large surrounding some of these items that are highlighted.
What I suspect is that the consultant that we're about to hire will look at it holistically, so to speak, and evaluate the different stakeholders and how they communicate and how they get information, and the people that don't have computers to, they'll have a handle, whether it's the website, whether it's a blog, Facebook, letters, getting to the IJ with announcements, going to already established community meetings, picking which ones would be the best to go to and who. I don't think that they will be doing it. It'll be staff, the superintendent, and board members, but they'll be helping us with the messaging. So I agree with you, Laura, but I think that having somebody with this expertise that can look at the big picture, it'll help us get ahead of everything, like Dr. Yoshihara was saying, regardless of where we are in the process. And then at that point, it'll probably come more clear to us how much of this is going to be a part-time, full-time position, how much of it they'll still need to be supplemented by a contract. So I think the first step is it's great that, not to make light of that comment, because I do recognize she was concerned, but that's why I thought it was great the way the contract was changed, that regardless of the first month, we're going to have some expertise to help us navigate.
Okay. So I think we're tackling some of the things that came to light in this board self-evaluation. I think we all need to think about how we are complying with the governance handbook and continually strive to do better. It's there weren't too many surprises on here for me. There's something about the board president that thought, something. I did not take it personally. I do not know who said something, but
which number is that?
I didn't write it down. I flew through it. So I was trying not to take it personally, but I'm thinking, okay, I need to work on that. So that's the way the board effectively, no, that was good. Anyway, we can all pick and choose in here, things that we know about ourselves that we can work on. And I think when we have our board development workshop, which will just be a regular meeting, but we'll devote a little bit more time to the governance handbook, we can see how we're doing on these items that we didn't do so well on here. 25?
The board agrees on the role of the board president in managing board meetings. Is
That may
one?
have been, that
But
may have been
my
it.
good, it's strength for simple majority, but you wanted to be all members? And so you
Well,
feel
I
you're
wanted-
taking that
I
as-
wanted the rarely person to be, you know. Okay. This is getting in the weeds.
Laura.
Okay. All right.
Remember, it's a perception and it's a different
Okay,
time
so
already.
any more comments on this?
Could we follow up? I don't know, the $200 is not going to get us what I'm going to suggest here, but I wonder if there is somebody from CSBA who can either come to our meeting when we do this workshop, because I would expect that someone from CSBA can work off of this with us, and that would be very effective.
That's, of course, what they suggested to the tune of $2,000. So we could talk about,
$2,000?
yeah.
What if we went to them?
Yeah, well, but we can think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I think
Okay.
that's a good idea with everything we're tackling, you know, so.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this board self-evaluation? Now is your time to,
Say
know.
you agree with
Yes.
item number 42, whatever it is.
There was something about public comment. I am making a point of asking. All right, everyone's getting tired,
Yeah,
really
we're all
tired.
tired.
Okay. We don't need to make a motion or anything on this. We're moving on. Thank you very much. We're on to the two items that were pulled off of consent, which were the minutes from August 8th. Yeah, go ahead.
If you could give us a statement, I think it's important that we get a statement in the minutes, I think, about what constitutes chronic absence, because the way it's stated in the minutes currently is that it's a number that's like 18 annually. Well, that mentally sets up, at the end of the year, you look at that then. Who's been chronically absent, rather than using the definition that means we have to stay on it and monitor it.
Right, yes. So, yes, a chronic absentee per the state is somebody who misses 10% or more of the days of the school year.
Yes, and I'd like that language to be reflected in the minutes, and that's my.
It's page 3. Page 3, item A.
Yeah, so it's, I think what she's saying is to clarify it, that it's 10% of the school days of the school year.
So we want to add that?
I think you can replace 18 days per year with 10% of the,
That's it. That's it.
18 days with 10%?
of the school days of the school year.
Thank you. Thanks, Tara. Great.
Okay.
Good.
Any other questions on the minutes?
I did, but just, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through it now and I can't, we're talking about the minutes that were on 20A, right?
Yes.
August 8th.
28.
August 8th, yeah.
Give me just a second, I'm sorry. I did have a question about this. 20A. Oh, item number 10, page 2, second paragraph. Says Chuck Ford reported that he has met with Les Lundgren regarding the TFT superintendent survey. It's not the
Oh.
TFT superintendent survey, it's TFT survey, so I would.
Satisfaction survey.
I would strike the word superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
Good call there.
Yeah, didn't see that.
Right.
Satisfaction survey.
I would just say TFT, but you could say whatever, if if you want to say satisfaction.
that's not.
Agnostic.
That's what it's titled, is the TOT satisfaction.
Okay.
Yeah. Missed that. Thank you.
That's what happens when you read.
Yeah. Okay, any other changes to the minutes from August 8th? Okay,
As amended, I move that we approve the minutes from August 8th.
I second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
We didn't do the preferential vote that, okay.
Sure they're
Okay, D, item 20D, the vendor warrants,
Yeah, I'm just going to abstain from that. So we can
just
vote.
abstaining. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to ratify August 2017 vendor warrants?
I move we ratify the August 2017 vendor warrants. As, yeah, period.
I second. I can do that.
That's right.
Preferential vote, trustees, student trustees? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I like
Adult
that.
trustees, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions?
Oh,
You just approved.
abstain.
Yeah. You got Chuck abstained. Okay, thank you. Meeting adjourned.